to read roll.
So there is some
All right,
moisture
thanks.
issues with
Welcome
the
to
slab.
the June 12th meeting of the Facilities Improvement Committee. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag.
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I always forget to ask if we have the meeting link live because I don't know who makes the meeting link live for Google Meet.
I will.
All right, Jen's going to do that for us. All right. You want to start with the attendance?
Yeah, I'll read roll. Just say present Amy Shivels, Bradley Loeb,
Present.
Brandon Levake, Bruno Ruthier.
Present.
It's not letting me enter you in present. Okay, Brian Carney, Dan DeWitty, DeWitt, sorry. Denise, Jason, Joe Jositis,
Joe said email that he would have to try to log in.
okay, Joe Lassard, Kerry Douglas,
The clock, look at that, Gary.
Oh,
Marilyn Wade,
on the move, too.
Small T next to her name.
Salty, dude.
Michael has said he's absent for the summer,
I said
Owen
Small T.
sent his regrets, Raylan, Ray Peoples,
Here.
Good.
Rich LaSalle, Bob Leary, not yet, Ron Oblinus,
Here.
Brian O'Connell, Dan Mitchell, Dave Ross, Doug Totten, Jacob Hess, Jen Grantham,
Here.
Matt Shoemaker,
Here.
Mike Jetty absent, Andrew Cutter absent,
Andrew's
Peter
not really on
Plansky.
this.
Yeah, I'm gonna strike him.
Present.
Peter Plansky. Anyone present that I did not call?
Yes, we had one in the back row.
That's Bruno.
Yep.
If you're part of the committee, or are you just a community member attending? Okay.
Welcome. All right, so that concludes.
Yep,
attendance.
that's
Thank
the
you.
whole roll. Thank you.
All right, awesome. Well, we're going to start today with just a quick recap on what's going on over at LMS. Jen?
So I can take minutes and say it at the same time. It's gonna be tricky, but things are moving finally at LMS. We have just about half the field of solar panels are installed on the roof. They're working to connect them. There are a couple other pieces they're working on with the transfer to connect to Eversource. But as we are still on the power purchase plan, it's not impacting the taxpayers at any point right now because that power purchase plan is still in effect. So even though we're still paying bills to Eversource and the panels aren't functional quite yet, it is all working out in our favor for this point in time.
Did they give you, I know we've had a couple updates, but have they given an updated estimated time of completion?
The end of June is what I heard last. Is
End
when
of
the
June,
panels
early
should
July
be done.
for the
Hear a
panels.
year on that, just out of curiosity.
Yeah, that was 2030.
This part, they feel pretty confident that it's going to be July 2024.
I have
The
gone up
interconnect
and
piece is something else, then the batteries, we're probably looking December, maybe January, before it's fully up.
I'm just gonna sit here quietly.
I don't believe you.
Because I raised my concerns 2 years ago.
All right, thank
Yeah,
you.
so that I've been up to take a look at the panels. It's a process to get them installed. There's a click and lock system. They're the dual-sided panels, so the white roof is reflecting them off the bottom.
Bifacial.
Bifacial. Well, see, I'm not a construction worker, but I definitely have played one on TV a few times in the last 3 years. Just learning about the process. So I'm just happy to stop the elephant ballet on our roof in the very near future.
Is that the last piece of the total renovation?
God, I hope so.
Did
I mean,
the kitchen
yes.
get done?
The kitchen is done.
'Cause that was the other piece that got delayed.
That was all done last summer. That was all done before school started this year.
And it's, I guess probably not here, but some point can we actually get into kind of the details of this whole project and have some understanding? One of the things I just like to understand or consider is the original warrant article, and I guess the process to fund it was through a municipal lease plan?
I can't answer any of those questions.
Yes, it was through a lease plan.
I think it's what it's called. This is the warrant article. Municipal lease agreement. So my question becomes, is that an option for us on the school side?
No,
Why?
they barely squeaked this one as a lease plan because they were doing upgrades to existing mechanical systems as the lease. An investment such as a addition or renovation is going to be a bond. And then you'd see significant pushback from the budget committee and other groups in town if we saw any other way. The school board has also indicated that they would do a bond. So I would be very cautious about trying to do something that could be perceived as an end run around this process.
That's what I was gonna say, is what does the optics look like to the community if we try to do it that way?
Well, I guess my question is, why was it done in the first place?
Because you need 50% for a lease and 60% for
Civil
a
majority
bond.
versus super majority.
Exactly. There was, a bond would not have passed. You would clearly not have gotten two-thirds? It wasn't two-thirds, 3/5. But a lease payment only requires 50% plus one vote. It's a lower threshold.
And I get that side of it.
But that's why they went with a lease as opposed to a bond, is because it was easier.
Okay, I would just like to know some more about it, because
It just,
there appeared to be, or I assume there was some rationale for doing it. If it was simply to get a 50%, then that's one side of it. But I don't know enough about the
okay.
the
You
mechanics.
absolutely talk to the school board, but when it was presented, it was, at least when we were there, it
Were you on the board
appeared
at
to
the
be that there was confidence in 50%, that they could get that across the finish line.
Okay, I'll stop there.
All right. Well, thank you for.
Sorry, one question on LMS. I know you mentioned that you guys are working with Eversource to get hooked up. Is that in, like, signed dotted line as to when they'll actually do the hookup?
I think that's one of the things that they're currently waiting for, to my last knowledge. I wasn't in the last meeting.
Okay.
But I believe that they are in the process of getting that agreement with K and the power
Okay.
solar panel company. I think that part is, yes, it's just a question of when the go button is. There's inspections that have to take place for them to be able to connect it, and everything has to be installed for that to happen.
Yeah, no, and I understand that. I just know that for a resident, it is like an act of Congress and removing teeth with rusty spoons to get connected to the grid if you install solar panels.
Took me 6 months.
Yeah, that's what I'm worried about. So even if we get everything installed and then they go start asking,
They have
then it's
been-
another 6 months.
The asking has been well underway for over a year, even before the solar panels were off of whatever cargo ship they were on somewhere, however they got here, but they're here and they're up. It's just a question of being inspected and going through all those components to make sure that they can be connected.
So they did present a plan to us at the last meeting, the Dynamic Grid Company. And it was not detailed enough for us. We were looking for far more specific. Everything was very much generalities. So here are the generalities we had last Wednesday. Interconnection activities by Dynamic Grid and Eversource scheduled pending July. That's the interconnection. The production of the batteries in fourth quarter, delivery of the batteries roughly December, January, weather permitting, and any other unforeseeable circumstances. So that's not sufficient for the board. We're looking for much more detail as to when it's going to be there. So this went back to them after our meeting last Wednesday.
Now, our understanding, at least my understanding of what's been explained to me about the battery backup system, is that because we are in a power purchase agreement that is being honored, it's really the other party to the contract that's taking the hit on that, because they have to honor our pricing, and the battery backup system was in place to sort of offset some of the cost. So ultimately, while this PPA is in effect, we shouldn't be experiencing any financial,
And they've confirmed that the batteries, which are different from what we originally spec'd, will be compatible with the system?
So I wasn't at the last. meeting.
That's what they've told us.
I wouldn't worry about that. The modern batteries with with their management systems that are built into them, they're all pretty much interchangeable.
I'd still like that in writing.
Well,
To my knowledge, the original specs were for some prototype, brand new type of battery cell that was not approved anywhere in the contiguous United States.
Fantastic.
However, they have since shifted to a more commonly used approach for battery storage.
Probably lithium iron phosphate, right?
No,
That does
I
not,
don't think
that
they
that
are.
doesn't
There's
sound
something
familiar to me.
Everready size C.
1,000 of them.
So the question of what's disposal cost in about 5 to 10 years? All that money we saved.
Yeah.
Recycling.
We'll do one more question on this, and then I do want to move on to the
All
next
right,
thing.
with respect to the batteries, do all solar installations require this type of system?
No.
When did we decide and why did we decide to use batteries? Anybody know?
The batteries for storage of power, like during the summer, we'll collect a lot of power.
But
We
they-
can sell that back to
Our electric
Eversource.
bill is based on the peak usage throughout the year. You're billed constantly by that rate. So the purpose of the battery is to shave the
Level
peak
up-
off
level of the
and
playing
reduce your
field.
rate, so your overall consumption is billed based on a lesser rate.
So it makes financial sense to have batteries?
Yes.
Well, it does,
The
okay.
company does it regularly.
With that was my last question on batteries, but with respect to the end around of the lease, there's current legislation to make that
Clear.
against the law. So that for something that is an obvious bond situation, you cannot use a lease.
So another Litchfield law? Fantastic.
No, this is a state, and I don't know
All
what
right.
the status of it is.
I do want to.
I'm just saying.
Is it about Is it about?
General question, not necessarily about the solar panels.
Okay, because I really need to get to Kyle.
It's just a question about like projects in general. Like when we contract projects like this, are there clauses in those contracts that say if you don't meet the deadline, there's a
Liquidated
financial
damages?
penalty?
Liquidated damages, they should be.
So I believe the conversation at the last board meeting, and correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, but the talk was in regards to they are being penalized right now because they haven't met the deadlines because we are under the power purchase agreement. So even though our bills are well above what that power purchase agreement minimum is, they're eating that additional cost. We are still at that level. So
It's not
that
quite the same as a penalty for not being finished on time, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, Kyle might know the answer if that's like something that you can bake into these contracts. I don't know if they,
Liquidated damages is certainly something that can be written into a contract, but the problem is
Have to
that
have
then the
damages.
contractor gets really good at getting around it.
Yeah.
And so, it serves its purpose sometimes, but I try to
I
avoid
can
it.
maybe shed some light on all of this, the whole conversation, since first of all, I apologize for being late, I was working in Mass today, and I was home till late, but, what Kerry was talking about when we came in, first of all, the LMS project came in last minute right under the gun. We didn't know anything about it until we started the budget process, and the superintendent stated that he didn't believe that he could get 2 bonds. They knew they were going after a bond for the elementary, but he didn't think he could get a second. Those were his words, okay? And then as far as the batteries, originally this project was slated for capacitors, because I asked that at the deliberative when this was being projected. And they said, where's the batteries? It was capacitors, okay? So I asked Andrew at the last budget meeting, when was it changed? And his response was, the change was communicated for the first time at the May 14th, 2024 meeting that included a walkthrough of the project with the vendor dynamic grid. Okay, so then I asked, the following question was the cost difference between the capacitors and the batteries, because capacitors are more money than batteries, usually. And Andrew's response was, in speaking with Dynamic Grid, the cost difference between the originally scoped capacitor system and the now planned lithium titanium oxide system is approximately $100,000. So apparently it's going to cost more, because he says it's fully absorbed by Dynamic Grid and does not directly cost the taxpayers more money.
Until it comes
The
down.
LTO system will be supplied by Toshiba, a well-known reputable brand in this market. The main driver for the change is due to supplier issues and not being able to adequately source the capacitor components that would meet the specifications of the installed system. The change to the LTO system has increased our timeline with a now expected delivery date of the battery energy storage system in the December-January timeframe.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, I am going to cap this conversation off because we have, as you may have noticed, we have Kyle here, and I would like to take advantage of the time that we have with him.
Is he by the hour?
I'll talk to that in a minute.
So as you all know, we had a couple weeks ago now, Kyle came out to GMS to go through the school again. Ron, you were there, correct?
Yes, sir.
I was not able to make that.
As
but
was Mr. Lascelles.
Mr. Rich was there.
Awesome.
Yes, I'm glad he was there. It was helpful.
So I'll let you guys kind of recap.
All right, I've got a little speech prepared. So there's a few things I want to talk about. There's also the conversation I had with Amy Clark at the Department of Education about the building aid. I do want to talk in general terms about the options and the next steps moving forward, just making sure that we're all on the same page. And I think that there's some general concepts with those that it doesn't matter what the numbers are, that they're going to remain the same. So like the pros and cons for each option, and we can start sorting those out before we get all the final numbers in. And then we'll talk about the walkthrough. I don't have numbers on the walkthrough. Bonnet Page and Stone is working on that, and I haven't got that back from them yet. And I honestly just haven't had much time myself to work through that. It's the end of the school year, and so I've got projects going in the ground, and it's been just a mad rush for the last 2 or 3 weeks, and I'm kind of at my limit. So have some patience with me. And to your point, I got an email today from Doug Totten looking for an invoice for the time I've been spending, and I told him, no, I'm not sending one. At this point in time, I'm feeling that my time here is basically an investment to try to get your confidence back, because it was a failed bond vote and there were mistakes that were made, and that I feel like my team was partly responsible for the high cost of what the school came in at. So I want to make do on that and help you through this next step. I know that with a conversation with you that it's probably going to be another process for hiring an architect, and I'm hoping I'm the one, but you know, this is sort of an attempt to create some goodwill, and so no, I'm not going to be invoicing for my time tonight. That said,
Well, then take all the time you need.
The meeting just now goes to 9.
I do want to get home in time for dinner, but that can be later. Oh, all right. I'd like to start with a state ed conversation. I called Amy Clark and had a few questions about Litchfield with her, and the comment back was that an addition renovation project would qualify for state aid. It just wouldn't keep you on the rank list. You'd have to reapply. So basically, if the option that's chosen is additions renovations, you lose your spot. You put in a new application that's due May 1st, 2025. If you rank high enough to get that money, the earliest you would get it then would be July of 2020. Well, actually, you wouldn't get the money, but you would be approved by July of 2026, and the money coming sometime at the end of that year. But the problem is that there are currently 2 other districts ahead of you. So you're number 3 on the list. I thought you were number 2, because Colebrook has voted their project down twice, and it's not looking good for them to pass it. But with the new rules that are going into effect, the law's been rewritten. I actually was on a volunteer committee helping rewrite those, and I didn't realize that the new rules, I knew the real rules had a clause in there that allows districts 3 opportunities. Basically, you got 3 March town meetings to pass a project, and if you don't, then you get knocked off the list. But what's interesting is that both Litchfield and Colebrook, even though those failed, with the new rules go into effect, it sets back to 0. So you're going to end up with 4 opportunities to pass something if you stay on the rank list, and Colebrook's going to have 5.
Was 4 considering our failed, including our failed vote?
Right, so you have 3 more to go. I thought you would only have 2, but
So we don't need them.
Let's hope we don't need them. Exactly. Exactly.
Can I
Well,
just
Yeah.
stop there? So let me just understand. An addition or renovation would qualify for state aid,
yeah,
depending on what we submitted for an application that was approved.
yeah.
The applications couldn't be submitted till May of next year.
Yep.
And the first opportunity for a potential approval is July 26th.
Yeah, so
So, let me just finish. So, you wouldn't be able to put a bond out for a vote until March of 2027.
2026, I think.
No, 27, because we get approval in July of 26.
so the way it works is.
Next time,
But it was just like our last bond was contingent upon approval.
Right, so the votes, let me back up.
that'll be,
The applications, May 1st, 2025,
Or do buy.
due by, and
You can
then,
get it in earlier if you want.
absolutely. But you know how it works.
Yeah.
Last
Just
minute.
saying. That's the due date.
You get your rank list, where you're on the rank list by, I think it's November 15th. So that way, during budget season, you know if you're gonna get funded or not, and you can go to vote knowing this. The problem is that the other towns that are currently on the rank list stay on the rank list. So you're number 3 right now. If you reapplied, at the best you would be is number 12. Because 3 out of the 17 that were on it, 3 got funded. That brings it down to 14. There are 2 projects that I believe have gone off the list because they either went forward or they decided to go in a different direction. And there may be one other that drops off the list. But you're likely going to be somewhere between around 12 or 13. Maybe if others drop off, you can get down to 10. But they're only funding 2 or 3 projects a year. It's going to, so to your point, it's, yeah, the very best case scenario is you vote in March of 2026, it passes, we get the drawings done, completed by, say, the end of the year, you apply for a bond in January of, or you can get the state money in January of 2027. Because you have to have the drawings completed, everything approved, permits in hand before you get your 80% up front. And so that happens after the drawings are completed. So the architect would have to work from March through the end of the year. Any project over 10 or 15 million is just going to take 6 to 8 months to complete. And plus the permits, the State Department of Environmental Services takes on average somewhere between 3 and 5 months to do their reviews. So it's going to be almost a full year before you get your state money.
so in summary, at this point, if we wanted to move any project forward in a reasonable time frame, it's going to be likely a renovation that we fully fund ourselves.
Yes. Yeah, because otherwise, because of the other schools on the rank list already, you're probably really looking at 28, 29, maybe even 2020, 2030 before you get the state money.
But that's only true if we reapply
Under,
currently on the list in third, you said, right?
But that's only for a new school.
Right. So, but if,
So on
there's an
the,
option for a project that could be sooner, but it's not a renovation.
there's an option for a project that could be sooner with state aid.
With state
There's also
aid,
an
it's not
option
a
for a project that can be a renovation
With state
without state aid sooner. Or there's an option for, there could be a project down the road potentially with state aid for a renovation project. But we would have to qualify, we'd have to hit certain things. Now, one thing that we had talked about, and I think you've talked to Amy about this, and I don't remember what the answer was. There were certain components of the renovation that we were concerned might not qualify regardless. And was the proximity to 3A one of
Yes.
them?
yes.
And has that changed? Like, is that no longer
So
a
the
factor?
the requirement is that you have to meet everything that you put in the original building aid application. And so the original building aid application said that we were going to move the school further away from 3A.
So if we just left it out of the application, then we could qualify? Or is that something that the state looks to as a safety issue?
They ranked us high. They gave us a lot of points for fixing that problem. So if we don't fix that problem, those points go away and you drop off the list.
Gotcha.
So that's just one item, but there's other ones as well.
How far do we have to move the school for it to be moved?
Where it's safe. So basically, the way that I look at that is the cars that are queuing up on the highway. We need to get them off the street. And so the way to do that is to basically have a long driveway. A project that I just did down in Swansea has about the same number of students. And what I calculated is the number of cars, they have almost 160 showing up. And if you stack the cars end to end, that's a quarter mile. So it's a very long driveway in order to get them off the street. What we did there is we actually created 2 driveways and did 2 lanes in the same direction. So that way you could do 860 cars is really 180, and then with 2 driveways, we can double the capacity.
Do we have room on this?
Yeah, in the last design, we moved it way up into the back of the ball fields and tucked it into the woods, and it gave us a very long driveway. And
But I want to just stop you there, because moving the school is one solution,
yeah,
but creating a long driveway is another solution.
you still
And
have
can do
kids in the
that by going
proximity of
around-
3A, so
What's that?
you're going to get. You still have kids in the proximity of 3A, even if you get the driveway to
So
work.
there was
Well,
discussion about
Fully disagree.
removing, decommissioning, eliminating a section of the building,
yeah.
right? With, obviously keeping the one that everybody in town would be heartbroken to see gone. Ignoring that building.
We would never take down the 1930s.
Exactly. Anytime I suggested it, I was like, yes, reminded that this is a town with pitchforks. So ignoring that, would removing that space not address the proximity to 3A?
It does help. It does help. But one of the closest places to 3A is the cafeteria. And so, without moving that, it would be difficult. And the thing is that I'm not the person that does the rank list.
Yeah, I
The
understand.
Department of Education does. They have a committee that looks at it. When I mentioned this whole concept to Amy Clark, she said, yeah, it's unlikely. She didn't say it wouldn't. She wasn't going to be definitive. She's pretty clear about her role as an administrator. She doesn't, in definitive terms, tell you anything until you actually make the submission. But she was pretty clear that an addition renovation project would likely would knock us off the list. So looking at the new school option, then I think Matt kind of suggested, yes, if you voted next March, and we were to complete the drawings next year, you would get your building aid probably in January 2026.
So, question 2.
And if I could just follow up on, the numbers would change, because now we're allowed to update the costs. And so my calculation is based on what happened with inflation during COVID. See, when we put in the application, we're basing it on pre-COVID numbers. And then we had 42% inflation during COVID. So if we can update those figures, you're going to get an extra 42% in your building aid. Your building aid would then possibly go up to 12 million. And she confirmed that that's probably true.
So for those who might consider adding and renovating to other buildings in town in an effort to perhaps decommission GMS, would that qualify?
Possibly. Again, Amy's the one that
Because
would-
it'd still be additions and renovations, just not to GMS.
Yeah. I don't know for certain,
Well,
but
that would be,
I think
either
it's
way,
possible.
that'd be a new submission.
Right, but I'm saying that definitely eliminates the 3A problem if we're no longer on 3A.
Yeah, I don't want to make it.
I'm sure there's a lot of factors, right? Like, so when they decide how do you rank, right? Like, just because you apply doesn't necessarily, it's not a first person to apply gets number 1 and then down at 12, right? They look at all different factors and
There's like 100.
figure out where you lay out, right?
It's like 150 points. And so what we're talking about with the Route 3A is just
a
like
portion.
20 points.
Yeah.
So we would have to go through the application and look point by point to see if those projects or additions and renovations, would it all change the ranking? If it changes the ranking by even a little bit, you're knocked off the list, because it's unfair to the other towns that apply at the same time. So we need to, if you want the 12 million, we need to, this year, then you need to stick closely to what was in the building aid application. If it's additions and renovations or
Which is a
anything
new
else.
school.
Exactly. Anything else, you just have to reapply. And she was actually encouraging Litchfield to reapply. Now, I just kind of gave a scary story where there's a lot of people in front of you, but also, not all of them are staying on the list. They're also getting kicked off the list. So is it possible that instead of being number, 12 on the list, that you end up being number 5 pretty quickly. It's possible, but I have no idea. You'd have to really study what the other school districts are doing and seeing if they're staying on the list or not.
And this is not being presented as the end all be all. I just want to be clear. Like this
Yeah,
is
yeah.
just
This is just information
pertinent
right now.
information for people to understand about sources of funding to help solve the problem. So we do not have to go for state aid.
I'm trying to take minutes and I'm having a struggle party right now. Can I just reiterate what I've written down to make sure that I'm not
Should I slow
inaccurate in what
down
I'm
a little
saying?
bit?
Please, because I want to make sure that I'm recording accurately what you're talking about here.
You're not, I assure you.
I don't feel like I am, which is why I'm stopping the meeting to ask the question. So you had a DOE conversation regarding building aid.
Yes.
If the option is to renovate, Litchfield loses our spot, we would need to reapply,
Probably.
probably. It would qualify, but you couldn't be submitted until May of 2025.
It may qualify.
It may
May
qualify.
qualify, and the submission date is May. Due date. Thank you. Is May 1st.
You don't get an answer. You don't get an
Do the
answer.
homework early.
You don't get an answer earlier if you do the homework early with this, though. Unfortunately.
You don't have to wait.
Is the ranking done all at the same time?
Yes, so they take from May 1st, 2025 to November 15th, 2025
Okay.
to establish the ranking.
So November 25th, 2025 would be where ranking would come out. Other districts stay on the list, which would bump Litchfield to number 12 or 13 potentially. Only funding 2 to 3 projects a year. Vote in March 2026. July 26 is when money would be available. Drawings need to be completed and approved in order to receive the 80% of the state money. Requirements need to be that everything are resolved, including the proximity to 3A.
That was just,
That's for the current ranking.
yeah.
For the current ranking, so
Yeah,
that's not
it-
for, see, I wanted to clarify, 'cause-
And that was just as an example. There are other points in the application that we would have to make sure that we're hitting. Because, the energy efficiency, there's no way we're going to be able to insulate the existing building in the same way you do a new school. There's no way that we'd be able to rearrange all the classrooms to be in the same level of quality as what we do with the new school. So I really.
I'm gonna stop you there. Don't make statements like that, please, because I got some ideas that address everything you just said.
But does it qualify? Do your ideas qualify? For
I
the
don't
state?
know. I don't know. All I'm saying, I don't want to make,
Absolutes.
I don't want to make assumptions.
But I mean, so
Shouldn't be saying either.
so I just want to push back on that for a second, because we're sitting with an architect who sat with the state and has had multiple conversations about
Yes.
this. So what more, aside from trying to get the person from the state to come here and look at every specific thing we're talking about, what better source of information could we be
Yeah,
getting?
no, the point that I wanted to bring up is that you talked about couldn't insulate the building anywhere near, like, new. I actually got some thoughts on how to do that.
Yeah.
Quite
So-
easily.
I don't want to make it sound like I'm just simply pushing a new school, because
Well,
I've done a
that's what I
lot
wanna
of
be careful.
renovation projects. I was telling Ray right before the meeting, I'm working right now on an 1895 building down in Troy. It's a beautiful building, and it is arranged in such a way that I can make it very useful and pretty close to new condition quality. I was asked by that district to explore abandoning it and creating a new school on the outskirts of town, combining it with the neighboring town. And throughout the process, we realized the new school was not cost-effective. It was actually more cost-effective to do additions, renovations to all the neighboring towns. One of the big things about that was the busing, that it cost them somewhere around $1,500 a student to bus. And if you're creating a building outside of town, you're busing everybody. And just the cost of the busing ended up exceeding the cost of the bond. So I'm not just proposing a new school. I'm really trying to look hard at what makes the most sense here. So anyway, with the state building aid, again, it's not our decision on whether we get dropped off or not. It's the state's. And if we want to try to stay on but do an additional renovation project, we'd have to look at the whole point system, not just the proximity to 3A. The 3A issue is just what she brought up. So,
I have one more bullet to read, sorry. So then, the current state of the affairs is there are currently 2 other districts ahead of Litchfield with the new rules and the new law that has been rewritten. There's a clause for 3 town meetings to be successful.
Yep.
It sets our clock back to 0, so Litchfield would have 3 more opportunities. If we chose the 12 million, a new school would be necessary to stay at number 3.
It's 4, you said 4 more chances,
Well,
right?
No,
it
3.
was 4, including the one that we just lost.
We just, right? Is
Right.
that- Okay.
It was a surprise to me that Colebrook stayed on the list because they've already voted twice and voted it down. And the old rules said 2, the new rules say 3. But then she told me, yeah, it gets reset and they're staying on the list. So that puts us one more district behind. And so we've also got Concord that's still on the list in front of us. So anyways, the one more thing about the state ed conversation was Ron had asked me very specifically if a new gymnasium was, the size gymnasium that we currently have in the plans was required. The existing gym is 3,500 square feet. What we put in the new building was 5,500 square feet. And the new rules get rid of all the space requirements. So no more 900 square foot classrooms, no more big gyms, no more any of that. It's all left up to the architect and the school district.
We still are
That's a
restricted
huge
by
thing.
classroom size by
Square foot per student.
Per student.
So if you've got
So we just have to consider as a group, right? If we end up saying, okay, we'll take smaller spaces, we may need more teachers depending on the size of the classes. But-
right, so if you've got an 800 square foot classroom, it doesn't meet the 900 square foot requirement, but if you're only putting 20 kids in there, you're fine.
What's the square foot per student?
35.
I thought it changed by age,
Was
or
it?
by
It
grade,
does
didn't
change
it?
by
Didn't it
age.
change
It
by
does.
grade?
Up to 4th grade, was it?
Well, no, I think middle school and higher, it's 30 or 32. It goes down, so you can put more
It
students in it.
breaks at the 6th grade level.
At the 6th grade level, yeah.
Well, I know in the other design we had at 4th grade, we were able to go to smaller classrooms.
No, that was fewer classrooms, and that was due to
That's by
the,
district policy.
yeah, that was district policy, putting the
My
number of
class
students
size
per class.
is K, 1 through 3, or 5, and then 6 through 12.
Gotcha, okay.
So, but in terms of being fair, you know, if it is decided, when we're looking at the different options, so we've got additions, renovations, we've got new construction. If the additions, renovations have a 3,500 square foot gym, I suggest that we put a 3,500 square foot gym in the new construction. So that way, at least we're comparing the numbers fairly. That's it on the state aid, the state building aid discussion. Any other questions on that, on what I heard?
So, sorry, go ahead.
Just a reminder too, if you're in the audience, if you could state your name.
With respect to the current ranking, you say we're at number 3, or
Yeah.
we were.
We are.
It was my understanding that we were number 2 behind Concord. Who jumped ahead of us, or?
So Colebrook was always ahead of us, but when they failed their bond twice, I thought they had been dropped off the list. But then when I heard that the number of attempts got reset back to 3, it put them back ahead of us. So they're actually ahead of Concord. They're number
They're
1,
one,
Concord's number 2.
There's one more in the back, yeah? No?
Me? Okay,
Did you have a
sorry,
question?
Jen, do it.
Yeah.
So you're saying that to compare apples to apples, we should look at a 3,500 square foot gym?
I don't recommend it. I'm just saying, it often happens when we're looking at different options.
Yep.
That somebody will just cut out something from one option in order to make that look better.
Right.
So if we're gonna cut something out of the addition and renovations, at least for the purpose of the academics, we should reduce it in the new school option as well. I don't recommend doing that. If you go to the GMS, and we went and looked at it, there's only about 4 feet at the end of the court to the wall. They've got some good padding there, but,
Yeah.
you know,
No,
somebody's gonna get hurt.
I was gonna say, cause
You have some padding there.
covering a rock wall.
Don't you just stand there and catch kids?
I was gonna say, because my follow-up was gonna be counterpoint, Mr. Mitchell, what do you think that you guys need in GMS if we were to expand it and accommodate even the same number of students or more?
We need a larger space for a gym. You know.
Okay.
Now, will I say when it gets to it and, you know, the rubber hits the road and we have to make the tough decisions? I don't know how much, but like, I would say
the gym at GMS as it is currently inadequate in size to meet our needs, both as a physical education space and as a community gathering space.
Okay.
If you were at the 4th grade recognition ceremony today, you could attest to that.
I wanted to get that big point. Thank you.
But like you're saying, it's on your needs and wants list, right? And where does it rank amongst those other things that you may need?
Exactly.
Exactly. It is. I would say it's a need more than a want, but I can't tell you where it ranks.
Yeah.
Compared to all the other needs.
I think the bigger gym was put in the new school really to be a new and better gym. It's supposed to be a middle school size gym. Right, that's what it was built for.
Right.
So that was where we would have the basketball games and rec and all that sort of stuff.
And it was also a combined space too, where, like if you remember the old design, like music was also there too. So it also acted as a community and a performance space too. It kind of clustered everything, and then there was also separate entrances and exits so that it could act as a community space outside of when it was functioning as a school.
So, Kyle, I don't know what you have next on your list. I do want to make sure we have sufficient time to cover like your time at the school, and
Yeah.
I think that's really important for everyone figuring out
Yeah.
where we're going with all
Yeah,
this.
so I have one more bullet point before that, and that is process. Kind of wanted to just set some ground rules as to these different options to make sure, that we're heading in the right direction. And again, maybe settle out. I think we can winnow down some of the options without even looking at the numbers because of feasibility. So the first one is the pay-as-you-go option. So there was a comment at one meeting that was asked, if it's a $20 million project, can we simply set aside $2 million every year for 10 years and get it done over time? And this is not the first time I've heard this. I've done that study for other school districts. It's a pretty Yankee, New Hampshire way to look at things. It's what I do with my house, and I'm sure other people do the same thing, do a little bit of projects at a time. But with a school, it doesn't work out so well for a few different reasons. First of all, it's very difficult to package the projects in $2 million increments. So you're going to have some that are 1 million, you're going to have some that are 8 million, and so your taxes are going to do this. And it's just really hard to get that capital improvement plan to flatten out. The other thing is that some of these things you can't do without other projects. So the best example is the mechanical system. If we're putting in new rooftop units with new air supply, that ductwork goes in the ceilings. So you have to take the existing ceilings down. So if you weren't going to replace those, well, you are now. And when you're taking the ceilings down, well, you're also taking down the lights. You might as well replace those because those are all pretty old. So now you've got a much bigger project than what you planned on. So instead of doing the mechanical one year, the ceilings the next year, you're pretty much doing it a wing at a time. And so it's a little bit more effort to try to figure out, which blocks, add up in a reasonable, logical project.
So you're not saying that you couldn't take the lights down and put the old lights back up, but what you're saying is that by the time that when you go to replace the lights, you're going to spend exponentially more because you've already paid for the labor to take them down.
It's almost as much cost to take them down and put them back as it would be just to put new ones in.
Well, the way to do that is ask for $2 million a year. We don't do a project every year. We wait until we get enough to do a logical segment.
So the next issue, though, is that, and this was...
If you were going to do it that way.
...more prominent during the COVID periods because of the inflation. But basically, inflation typically runs higher than the interest on your bond. And so the cost of inflation, the added increment in the cost over 10 years, exceeds the cost if you had just bonded it and did it all at once. And when you bond it and do it all at once, you've got more economy of scale by doing one bigger project. You also have less interruption to the educational process. Everything is a little bit cheaper. So the pay-as-you-go option, as much as it seemed like a good idea at first, I don't recommend it because it will be more expensive.
Joel, as I think Jen can probably attest to, having multiple years of students impacted by different construction projects over and over and over again over a really long period of time is not conducive to good learning.
The other thing
it's actually detrimental, I would say, without doubt. I think our teachers and our students at middle school level, again, I'm going to speak to what I've experienced in the last 3 years, and I can't even imagine doing it with kindergartners and first graders. The distraction, the sounds, the trucks, the tractors, the everything that is going on, our kids had a hard time focusing and paying attention. So I can't even imagine having active construction happening while learning is happening at the same time.
I can say it's not easy. I had split sessions during middle school as a result of a poor choice by the school board. So, well, they renovated, they didn't support the renovation, and the floor buckled over Christmas break. It was fantastic. So, split sessions, classrooms, and gyms. And we still talk about it. I mean, and the impact it had. So I can agree that construction during school for middle schoolers would not be ideal.
And I can't even fathom it for, we had temporary hallways running down the middle of a hallway while half of a wing was being worked on, and you hear,
And believe it or not, middle schoolers are actually
How does it
better
sound?
at don't touch that.
Yeah.
Than elementary schools.
I don't. No.
No. Overall, they are better.
The other thing too,
You have
aside
hanging
from
conduit from the ceiling. They're going to see if they can hit it on the
so
way
aside
by.
from economies of scale, like we also would presumably have the efficiencies that come from doing like all of like if
So
you're doing
from-
the lights and you're doing the insulation and all that stuff.
Right, so from year one, you get the benefit of the lower cost in electricity and heating and that kind of stuff.
It also makes it easier for long-term maintenance. I don't have
Absolutely.
10 different versions of lights. I don't have 10 different versions of filters.
LED lights last for 20 years.
Right.
So right now, you're going around replacing fluorescent light bulbs, like every couple of years?
If you ask Dan at GMS, it's actually sooner than that because we have them keep blowing out in certain rooms for
Yeah, well,
unexplained reasons.
Quality.
So before we jump to another option, I mean, we just heard a lot of stuff about the pay-as-you-go option, and I want to make sure that everyone in this group has the ability to chime in if you have strong feelings. I mean, a lot of people just chimed in about like why they don't think that's a great idea, but if there's anyone that's feeling like that is a good idea or that's something that we
I
should
think you have to
discuss
consider
more.
there is a place for it. My school's doing it, but it's very we finished out on Friday. Walls are being framed up on Monday, so it makes sense because we're doing a couple classrooms here, a couple offices there. It's contained.
Right.
So small projects make sense. When we're talking a huge project like this, that at that point it's beyond
For
where
the
it
amount
makes
of work
sense.
that we're talking about
It's
here.
hard to manage for
Yeah.
certain, sure.
Yeah. But I agree with you. The client of mine down in Troy also has the Monadnock Regional High School, and that's exactly what they do. 1.5 million every year, and they pick out a few things that they need to do, and they've done this for years, and the school is beautiful. So it does work, but I don't see it
But
working
ours
here.
is targeted as part of a longer.
Much smaller projects that you can potentially do over a summer, or
Right.
even in close off a section and keep it separate from the rest of the building.
We have a question in the back.
More towards maintenance
Hi,
rather
Laura
than
Ferrari,
capital.
Colonial Drive. How does pay-as-you-go work over 20 years in a town where you have to vote every year?
Good
Right,
point.
So year 1 and 2 get passed, year 3, 4, and 5, people say no thank you.
Right.
How does that work?
Right.
It would potentially be that you vote to authorize $2 million a year to be put into a capital
We
fund
can't- I don't-
that
we
would
can't-
accumulate and be used
I don't think you can do that.
at stages that you,
Or the goal would be that realistically, if you're going to do that method, you kind of have very self-contained projects. So if that project gets turned down, well then,
No,
try again
you-
next year.
that
But
would-
if you're doing mechanical system and this, that, and the other thing, then that was more
So
challenging.
your question is to Ron's point about if you wanted to do it like a flat amount year over year. I don't think that you actually could. I don't think you can raise and appropriate into future years. I think you.
You have to build a revolving trust fund or something.
That I would think that you would have to develop a fund.
Because we
But
have,
even still, you'd have to. You can't. You can't.
that's what
You can't
the,
appropriate future monies into a fund.
no, you can't. But you can put this year's funds in for future expenses.
Right. But my point is that that's a great question.
You
though.
cannot
wouldn't-
lock
couldn't
in
say
first.
you couldn't say voters for the next however 5-10 years you're going to have to put $2 million a year. You're right. Every year they'd be able to come back. Now what I think what Kerry just said was that you could say, okay, well this year is an $8 million project, so you vote in the $8 million project, but we wouldn't have a way to level it out. And I think that that's where bonding is.
I don't know that the folks in town would be all that freaked out about leveling out. The first project, if we were to do the roof, the HVAC, all that stuff, that would be one big project, and I'm just gonna say $10 million. I would hope it's not that much, but you could do that and say, okay, now we've got the building tight, and then you could wait a year or 2 years and say, okay, now we wanna do the next step, and that would be a separate bond.
So I want Kyle to respond to that though, because that's essentially what we're talking about with this. And what Kyle's saying is that it doesn't, it's probably not going to work.
But Kyle's talking about $2 million. I'm saying, what if we did the whole envelope, that all that needs to be done in the first shot?
Well, could that be
It's
broken down?
it's a slightly different flavor of the first one. And again, I have clients that do that, like Monadnock, they do that. What they found when we were doing, that was the high school. When we studied the elementary schools, though, they had a lot of work that had to happen. And when we started looking at the pay-as-you-go option, it was just untenable. It's not that it can't work, it just wasn't the best option long-term. And so having been through that with them, and also I've already done that study a little bit here as well, that it just, the added cost for the inflation and the untenable nature of how all these different pieces and parts, like, you were saying, replace the mechanical, replace the roof, but then, like I said, on the inside, do you replace the ceilings, do you replace the lights, and where do you stop, where do you draw the line?
Then you
It's
have
just
to know
more
layout.
difficult.
Well,
So
we
you
could
know
lay
what
that
you-
out before we
Yeah.
decided the bond,
Yeah.
right? And I think it would make sense to replace the ceiling, replace the lights all at the
Yeah.
same time. That's why I say it's $10 million.
Can I just chime in on that one also? But as soon as you take down the ceilings and you replace the lights or you replace the sprinkler system and you find other problems up there,
It happens.
once they see it or have it, they have to fix it.
That speaks to Owen's email that we all got earlier, where he was, they're doing that
Don't know
project,
what
and every
to
time
be
they
up
turn
there.
around, they found asbestos or some
I
other
think,
problem. And
not to speak, I don't know the full budget understanding of what happened with LMS. I'm not gonna take,
Had to take us there, huh?
I'm just gonna say, I was in the building when they pulled it down and went, oh my gosh, there's a 4-inch gap across the whole ceiling that doesn't it's not fire safe. We couldn't close the ceiling without closing that gap. There's this problem, there's that problem that come up when you start to peel back layers that you're not aware of in the scope.
And the other thing too is that when you get to a high school, just talk about the educational impact. In a high school, you have greater flexibility of space. A classroom is free 1 period, and though it was designated as an English class, you can make do with it as a chemistry class. For it's like.
I would encourage math before I'd put.
Yeah.
chemistry.
Spoken like a true elementary school.
Having done physical science as a traveling teacher, I would
Not
not
a lab.
encourage that.
So
But it's easier than
How about English to French?
You
How's
know,
that?
There we go, that's
it's a first grade class all day,
Yeah.
every day.
But
it's
to this
either
thing that they
useful or-
found at LMS, right? That is absolutely the way I understand the problem. They found this gap that we were leaking air in and out of the building at an enormous rate and costing this town thousands of dollars a month for the entire time. But if you plan a renovation project right, you're going to go in and open up that ceiling, pop the tiles out, and look to see what you have. There should be no surprises in reality. Unless you're knocking down old walls and things like that, then you can come in with surprises.
Well, they,
there's always
Surprises
surprises,
and
but you have contingency
renovations.
budgets for those sort of things.
That's what was lacking. Honestly, there was a discussion at deliberative about the contingency fund and lack thereof for purposes of fire stopping and other issues. So
Every construction project needs to have a contingency budget.
my fire
Absolutely.
stopping change orders were like through the roof. So I was like, "Where's the money?"
Well, in the effort to keep it moving, I don't mean to shoot down any particular option here, but rather this discussion, I think,
This
is
is
really
not the one
healthy.
you would recommend.
It's not the one I would recommend, but it's a healthy discussion for you to understand the process and the big concepts that go behind it. When we get to the additions renovations, again, my experience, not just on the Troy School that I'm doing now, but also the Florence Rideout School in Wilton, the Iberholmes Grove School in Raymond. What we did is we built some new construction first, moved the kids into it, tore down, rebuilt another part of it, moved the kids into that, and then in a third phase did the final piece. It works. We have construction happening feet away from where the kids are. It is disruptive, but it's possible, certainly possible. So an addition renovation project, I've already kind of thought this through a little bit, that we would do an addition at the north end of the building, off of where the,
Portables are?
no, off of the art room.
The northeast.
Sorry, say
Yeah, yeah.
The art room.
The art room. And so the portables are up front, leave those, because we need that capacity. Build a new addition, move some kids into there, do some renovations.
Isn't the kindergarten portable right outside the
That's more due east. That's more due east. You're talking off where the lawn is and the septic.
The road runs north-south, right?
Well,
Yeah.
So regardless of direction, at the end of the
The
art
road
room.
runs east.
At the end of the art room. So what it does get into is the septic tanks.
Okay.
So we have to
Building's
move
actually
septic
points
tanks.
north.
I would recommend moving the whole field, so that way we have more room up there for some driveways and stuff like that. But we could do a new building, a new addition there, we include a new entrance so we can get Homeland Security sign off on a secure entrance. Right now, when you come in the building, in order to get to the secretary's office, you gotta go through a corridor where there's kids passing through, and that doesn't meet code. Not code, it doesn't meet the Homeland Security requirements. So there's stuff like that that we could fix if we did a new addition off the, that end of the building. But it does get into the septic system. And so I think that the additions renovations could work, but in multiple steps like that. Just want to kind of lay the ground rules for that.
Question on
Yeah.
the renovations and additions idea. Are you only looking at a renovations additions to the GMS building, or did you look at the other options that we had talked about previously, where there was additions on the other two schools?
Yeah, so, I don't know, when was it, Dan? Almost a year ago that we did that study. You had brought it up at the deliberate session, and so, when we got back into, looking at this
Just
stuff.
about a year ago that you presented to us.
Yeah, and so we did look at that, and the issues there is, it was possible, I got excited about it at first, but then as I studied, I have the plans for the high school, the middle school, and GMS, and the high school, it is under capacity, but it doesn't mean there's a lot of empty classrooms. There's a few, but not enough to move like a whole school there.
But again, that's something that can be rearranged.
It can be rearranged.
Perhaps, or it could be looked at with scheduling.
I don't know if people know that the high school was designed to have a fourth goes in that front, and that's a whole lot of new classrooms.
Yeah, and that's what we look
Okay,
at.
I'm sorry.
There's a classroom wing that we come off the end of that and put another classroom wing in. What I learned about the high school was that when you look at sort of the proportions of different spaces and the capacity of the school, it's actually pretty well designed, that it has the right number of classrooms, the right size of the core facilities, the library, the gym, the cafeteria, until you put in more classrooms and until you bring in middle school. It would be a discussion that you'd want with your community. When you go to a 7 through 12 model, it's actually a pretty good model. I'm working on a high school in Manchester right now. It's a Catholic school, Trinity High School, and they're moving the junior high there. It's a 7 through 12 model, and they love it. It's great. But it was really important to them that we have separate entrances. So you've got the junior high is in one wing of the building, the high school is in another wing of the building, the gym, the caf, the main office, they're in between. So it's basically like a big donut with those core facilities on the corners and the two schools opposite each other. When I looked at the Campbell School for doing something like that, it's not that easy. There's one main entrance, there's not really a good opportunity to bring in another one, but the worst part of it is the cafeteria. It's very long, it's very narrow. There's little opportunity to make separate sections for the cafeteria. So it kind of comes down to, it's possible, it's doable. We've looked into the numbers, I'd have to polish them off and bring them up to speed. But in terms of quality of education, it's a little bit less, which is unfortunate because I do like the 7 through 12 model because now kids are in one building for a longer period of time. The other thing is I studied the LMS for adding the lower grades to it, and it's not easy. LMS is very close to the property line on one side, it's close to wetlands on another side, it's got steep slopes on a third side, and then you've got the front. So pretty much the only place we'd be able to do a decent sized addition is the front, but you get the gym there. So you've got long corridors to get to classrooms, and it's 2 stories in nature. It's not.
The offices all in the center of the building.
And then it would leave the offices in the center of the building. And then you get the same problem that you have currently at GMS in that that was designed as a junior high at one point. And so it's got rooms that just don't really fit the current program. And so with LMS, if you change the grade configuration, you would probably have the same issue. You'd end up with kindergartens in science rooms or something like that because, you want just the logistics of where you want them. So in terms of...
also, it ended up creating a school that was somewhere between 600 and 700 kids, and McElwain Drive was the way.
Yeah, the landlocked nature of it, because we only have one egress, we don't have a second.
I think
That's
we have to look
fixable,
at,
but-
I think we do have to look at other options as far as rearranging where the kids go.
Yeah. So,
For instance, Campbell next year will have 365 kids.
yeah,
That school is built for 600.
yeah.
So we could put the 7th and 8th grade in there without doing anything to that building. We would just have
But
to maybe change some
that's what he's
policy.
just, that he just went through.
But that's if you believe that 7th and 8th must be segregated forever and
Well, you still could
always.
segregate them. They
No.
segregated 5th grade forever, right? That was the 5th grade hallway. I'm sure it probably still
But-
is.
But, so then can you just like respond to what he's saying though? Because he just literally
Well,
gave us examples of what the issues are.
You know
You're
what
saying we
I
could
should
all
do
that.
is, you know,
The cafeteria issue, this came up at a school board meeting, for me is a non-issue. You have a 7th and 8th grade lunch. It's a simple fix. You just work the schedule.
Come spend some time at our lunches and.
No, I would never,
Get
I've been to
together.
middle school lunch, I'll never go again.
well, so what I should do is, you know, I've got a presentation that I did last year that's got all this information. I'm going through it really quickly because I just want to throw those issues out and get this discussion started. I can go through that in a little bit more detail and we can have a more detailed discussion about that, but it would basically take a whole meeting just to go through those options.
Can I,
But
can
your
I
main
just,
recommendation is to do the renovation additions on the GMS building? Is that your main recommendation?
Right now, I'm not recommending.
No, I'm not saying
Right.
versus any other option, but like to focus renovations and additions on that.
If money were no object, that'd be the one he'd go with.
The-
Well, other than the new school.
The goal here is to get to a point where we've got the list of options with pros and cons for each of them, and then you got folks can
Right.
make a decision. That list does exist because we did
Right.
it before, but I think we all realize that the last time that we did this presentation was with a different committee,
Right.
and you folks didn't hear it. So I think it's worth doing that again so that you can hear what that information is, and then you can make a decision.
Yeah. No, I think and some of it is going to come down to preference and personal experience. The school I went to, 7th and 12th grade, we passed each other in the hallway and high-fived each other.
Right.
So I have to me, they must not be, it does not come on my radar. Because to my experience, 7th and 12th grade actually worked well together. So
And
to
this
me,
comes back to
that's
something that we also have to feel out in the town.
right.
Like, what's the
So
support
so
level?
to me, that's not a deal breaker.
Yeah.
So if the concerns are cafeteria and 7th and 8th will interact with 9th through 12th, neither one of those to me are deal breakers.
Did
I
you-
understand for some they may be, but for me they're not.
Absolutely was when we built Campbell.
Did-
It was absolutely overwhelmingly a problem.
it was a huge problem 2 years ago when I had to talk just for 5 minutes about temporarily moving our 8th grade to
That
high
was
school.
different because they were shipping 8th graders from LMS to CHS at the end of the day and back.
No.
People, yes. So that was what the original conversation started with.
But that wasn't the plan. That wasn't the plan ever.
That's the plan that was out there that threw everybody in a hissy fit, was busing kids back and forth and then being told that there would be no impact to their educational time. Which makes no sense, because the kids are literally on a bus to and from school. How can you possibly not lose educational time?
You were part of that
Yeah.
planning. So that was not what was presented.
That was
Wasn't the main complaint.
not the main component of the plan. It was not the main complaint that parents had.
Was there, was that what was was it not going back and forth during the day?
7th or 5th through 12th graders ride the same bus every day anyhow. They were going to have to, in order to be able to meet all educational components, they were going to have the unified arts at LMS because we had no unified arts teachers to be able to teach at the high school. So yes, there was a component of that, but in the level of complaints, that was this much compared to.
Oh, because my kid is in that cohort, and I can tell you the parents I heard were like, how can you possibly bus them back and forth and not lose school time? So they're like, just send them all to CHS and be done with it. So perhaps people I talk to aren't the ones who talk to you.
So let's.
We'll talk about it more.
Best use of Kyle's time here
Yeah.
tonight.
So the last,
Just one more question. You said you presented all of this
Yep.
last year.
Yep.
Is that available in our files?
That's what I'm looking for right now.
So
See,
Yeah.
those of us who weren't.
That's why I'm-
maybe last year can-
It's also on TV from last year as well.
here at a
Yeah,
future
but in the
meeting.
meantime,
Yeah.
you have a lot of
It-
plate for what you have to
I
do
was saying,
here already.
if you remember the last meeting, Ron and I agreed to subcommittee to clean this stuff up.
Yes,
But 1.5 more days.
I know.
It's
It's almost overdue.
So sorry, Dan DeWitt, to what you mentioned, if it's on TV from last year, is it possible to grab that YouTube link and just drop it in the meeting notice or an email to get it out to everybody?
Yeah, I should be able to find it in Litchfield.
It's just on the
Um,
FTC.
I I also just want to reiterate, Joe Gizitis was trying to get into the Google Meet, but because we are not the owners of the Google Meet, we cannot let him in. So he is watching virtually from home. Hi, Joe. If you have any questions, feel free to type them into the email. Sorry.
So we have one more option to go through, and that's the new school. And there's a few new ideas that I just wanted to bounce off of people so people are aware. Basically, you know, I've heard a couple of times people saying that the vote on the new school was a referendum on the new school, not the cost. And I want to push back on that a little bit. I think that the cost was the issue, that it was too expensive. And I agree, and I'd said at the last meeting that I was at, that my team was partly responsible because I was looking at things that were just too expensive, but we were never told to take them out. And so now, with a little bit more freedom, I've started studying ways I can get the new school cost down. I think there is a possible path where the new school option could be comparable, if not the same, as the additions renovations. And then your choices, when you get to the pros and cons, well, is there a nostalgia about the existing school that you just want to keep it for keepsake, or is it really just the cost? And a new school is going to give you a lot more educational quality and other things that is just hard to fix on an existing building. So first things first, the cost per square foot. We had put in $425 a square foot for hard construction costs into the bond vote proposal. The project that I have down in Swansea, we just signed the guaranteed maximum price this past week. It came in at $355 a square foot. So I feel if the technical architect that I was working with before had their systems and their costs, if I'm able to basically reuse the kind of details that I used at the Swansea school, I could get this down to $355 a square foot. Inflation might bring that up a little higher. I think that if we targeted something around $375, we'd be good. Certainly less than $400 a square foot. So taking $25 a square foot off of the cost of the construction saves about $2 million on an 80,000 square foot building. If we can get it down to $375, there's another $2 million. So we've already saved $4 million. The bond vote, the total project cost was $44 million. $5 million was dedicated to state aid. So the total project that was bonded was $39 million.
37, wasn't it? Where are we bonding 37?
37 and change.
Yeah. So if we take $4 million off of that, we're down to 34. Additionally, my typical fee is 1% less than what we had put in a fee because my technical architect has a higher fee. So just by usually utilizing a different architect, we could save another 1% over the cost of the project. That ends up being significant. It's like $400,000. If I can reuse the details from previous projects, I might even be able to cut that down even further, down to another 1% below. So just in the architectural fee, you could save as much as $800,000. So now we went to 34. We're closer to almost 33 at this point in time. The state aid, as I said earlier, the bond vote proposal included $5 million, but with the current
No, included 7,
Well, it was,
The bond vote was for 5, but we were
Yeah, it only
planning
includes,
to get up to 7. but
because
we
it was 44, and that's what, it was 44, and the maximum was 7. That's where the 37 came from.
Did we
But
bond
that's
30
not
we
what was
bonded
in the-
39, didn't we? The warrant was for
39.
was for $5 million in state aid
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
because we weren't sure about whether we could get the other.
So I talked to Amy Clark, and she agreed with me that the likelihood is the number's going to be more like 12 million, and we're going to be able to reapply or rework the numbers or update the numbers for her, and so the likelihood is you're going to get something closer to 12 million.
But don't forget, it's 30% of whatever we spend. So 40 is the maximum. You gotta spend 40 to get 12.
Let me run the numbers, but I think I was running the numbers on a smaller.
Well,
I'll double check on that.
But it's Litchfield qualified for 30%. That's where we get those numbers
yeah, it
from.
was a 35.
So
So you gotta spend 40 to get 12.
Well, I'm just going through the ideas of how to save some money.
Okay, but I'm just,
So let's not get
As
too
you-
bucked
as-
into it.
the reason I bring that up is as you reduce the amount of the building, your state aid goes down. It's still 30% of what you're spending.
Yep.
So the 12, isn't always 12. So you can't deduct 12 from, say, 36.
So the worksheets that I have taken into account all that, and
Okay.
to
But
your
just-
point
just
though,
one.
also the soft costs go down. So not only does my fee go down because I can reduce my fee, but also the furniture and everything else that was in that bond proposal was based on a percentage of the total. So if we reduce the total by 10%, all the soft costs come down by 10%. Soft costs account for somewhere between 20 and 25% of the project. So there's potentially another $1 million we could shave out of that.
How could the soft cost change just because our total comes down?
Because the way that I estimated it was based on a percentage, not on
It wasn't
actual
a per
bids.
widget thing, it was a percentage of the total cost.
Right. Just like my fee is based on a percentage of the total cost.
Okay, so, all right.
Still gonna buy the same number of chairs and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
If
the
building
problem
the
is
same
the
size.
soft costs are gonna
Yeah,
So
but
it's
if-
something to,
be the
Different
same.
between different between saying we're gonna buy 32 chairs per classroom or 25% of the project. I mean, that could leave a lot of money floating around in there, that we could save if it was engineered
To your
closer.
point, Ron, I don't think it's the fact that we're gonna buy less chairs or less desks or anything. It's just the way that he estimated. He didn't say we're gonna buy 500 chairs.
Is that how that's
It was a
typically estimated?
25% of the total project for furniture.
I understand, so,
early estimates,
we
it's
may
the only
spend
way we
10.
can do it.
And it's a lower cost.
In order to get to the point where we're counting widgets, we need like a full set of drawings. And
Right.
we can't get there until we get further in the
Yeah, you
process.
have to do the design before you spec out your chairs and your
Right. So everything
projectors.
right now is just based on a percentage, so we.
Basically
as
a
we-
budget. You
We
would've had a
reduce
budget
it,
to work
we
with.
reduce the whole thing.
Allowance.
Furthermore, I looked at the space needs requirements. And Dan, did you get a chance to look through the worksheet that I gave you for High Ridge Hill? Basically, I did a project down in New Ipswich that was for the same number of grades, the same number of students. And it was 75,000 square feet, and the current plan that went to vote was 80,000 square feet. So I'm confident, because I've done it before, I can cut 5,000 square feet out of the bill.
I visited the school and I thought, this could work.
Well, you're just
How
talking
many
about shaving
classrooms?
2 off of the gym, right? So.
Yeah, and so, all right, so there's 7,000 square feet. We could, although I don't recommend.
I was
that
going to use the 2 towards your 5, but if you want to go further than that, sure.
Oh, no, I'll give you Dan and I talked about the,
Don't give her an inch, she'll take a mile.
the current plan that was voted on has something like a 3,000 square foot main entranceway.
Yeah.
The one at High Ridge Hill is 1,000. So there's 2,000 square feet just out of circulation. So I think, yeah. So I think with just spending a little extra time, carefully designing it to make sure that it's very efficient in terms of layout, spending a little bit of time carefully looking at the soft costs and cutting some cost out of there, I'm very confident that we can get the cost of the new construction down to the point where the bond amount that you'd be looking at is probably somewhere in the mid-20s.
And that would be,
Can I, one thing, when Kyle and I talked about that really like, I just didn't know and didn't think about, but with the old design, if you remember, the hallways were progressively larger, so they almost winged out. And he said, now you can't buy in bulk because every rafter is a different length and different shape. And I thought, like now you have the economy of scale because you can just buy, 26 of the same exact rafter as opposed to.
Build simple. Don't get fancy. No weird corners. No
Build a
planning.
building, you just
Build a
build
box.
switch. Just look at them.
And
No curves.
Yeah, no curves.
all right. So just to stay focused. So where we currently stand right now, what you've currently just explained to us is you've talked a little bit about the pay-as-you-go option.
Yep.
You've talked about
Additions, renovations,
additions, renovations, and how that's something that we can discuss further, look into further.
and multiple subcategories there.
Right. And then you've talked about for the purposes of being able to completely provide all options or compare all options, that if we were to revisit, we're not saying that we have to revisit, but if we were to revisit new construction, that there could be a substantial cost difference from what we've looked at before.
I think very substantial.
Because my opinion on the new construction piece of it was that it's sitting on a shelf somewhere. We have we have the information about it. But what you're saying is, as we look at these options, we should at least know that there's a potential difference in that cost, substantial difference in that cost.
I would like to be allowed to ditch the old plans and show you some new plans that are more efficient and more cost effective.
Okay, so I guess before you two ask your questions, the one thing that I do need to make sure that we get to, and we can ask your questions first, is I want to hear more about the current building, because I
Sure.
think we need to know that
Sure.
before we say, we still have more information that we need before we say how do we proceed with evaluating these things. You had a few questions back there.
So I got two quick questions, Joel, sorry. The requirements that you used for the previous build out, like, do you still have those? Like, are there other things in those requirements that don't necessarily need to be there?
The RFP.
I can definitely share that with you, which is the RFQ in which they were hired under.
Dan and I went through the list that I had from the previous school, and what I noticed was that pretty much every area had a little bit less space, but it had all the same number of spaces. So I think just by spending the extra time and designing it more efficiently, we can cut square footage out of the building
I mean, one
without
of the big
losing
things
program.
that I had heard that was in there was like a net zero building. Right? Like,
So
is that a requirement for state aid, or
No.
can we cut a lot of that out?
well, at this point in time, I think the committee last time I was here voted to take that out.
Okay. And then the second question was like, what was you talking about that Ipswich or New Ipswich, whatever?
Yep.
The cost of that building? If it's the same size we need for the same number of students, like what did they put on a bond for?
That was 16 million. But that was 15 years ago.
Oh, okay. That makes a big difference.
So today it's 35.
That makes a big difference.
44 million.
Exactly.
Well,
But is
16
there,
years ago, I
is
don't know.
there a way to take a established design like that?
I mean, you have to update it for
By a
code
year.
requirements and.
Update it to current pricing and standards, but can you repurpose a design that already exists?
Yes, and that would save me some time, and I could cut my fee another 1%.
Do it.
Two more questions back there. Carolyn.
Question I'm asking you to assume, do you think if it was in the mid-20s, it would have passed?
I'm sorry?
If it was in the mid-20s, would
You know,
it
we
have
don't,
passed?
I don't think that we have not had the ability to really go out to the community and ask that. That's part of the goal of what we need to find from the survey. So I actually, I don't know. I don't know.
What do
I
people in the
think it would
boards-
depend on what the monthly payment was gonna be for mid-20s, because that was a big payment that was requested.
Yeah.
Well, the cost was just one of the things, but that wasn't a big deal breaker. I stood at the polls for 15 hours that day.
Yeah.
And I heard from a lot of the people. There was a lot of different reasons why this didn't pass. The biggest one was, we don't need a new school. That was the biggest one. Cost was there, trust was there.
Yeah.
Okay, but we don't need a new school is by far the biggest one.
I've heard trust as being an issue a
But
lot.
Again, that wasn't the biggest
Yeah.
one. But we don't need a new school, it's the biggest one.
Well, so the point I'm trying to make with this list is that we should keep all the options on the table for now. And one of the reasons why I think the new school needs to be on the list and that we vet the pros and cons is that because I think that the cost that was proposed at this past March town meeting was too high, and that I have ideas to be able to get that down to something more reasonable. So.
That was your, I want to hear you.
My question was, we started off talking about pay-as-you-go, and you sort of informally said, does anybody think it's a good idea? Do we need to continue to carry the pay-as-you-go option?
Well, I think I think we have to have further conversation about it, because I think, Peter, that is still something that you feel very strongly about. I know
don't
Bob
think
feels
it's-
very strongly about that.
I don't think it's something we should just eliminate. I don't think there's anything that we should just eliminate right now.
But we don't have any numbers yet on the renovation. So
Well, we need to talk, we still have to have a
I know.
conversation
Yeah,
for the last
exactly.
45
So-
minutes here
so
about
there's-
the actual condition of the school.
And I would say we have a plan for the subcommittees that we discussed last time to meet. Would the survey committee come together and talk about a proposal to the community to say, who would think pay-as-you-go, who would you think renovation, who thinks don't do a thing, leave it as it is, you're fine? What are the choices that we have from there?
But
in that
even
survey?
before you get there, Jen, you should have a good idea what those things are. I mean,
We have to understand what the cost of each one of those things are.
exactly, and have something concrete, like here's a set of drawings for a tentative school. Here's a plan for a renovation. Here's, pay as you go, we subdivided off into 5 jobs.
a 10-year improvement plan over those 10 years costs X.
But I don't even think you need a full number.
Renovation costs Z.
Just close.
Or not even a hard number. You could say it'd be 20 to 30,000.
My
you know,
concern,
you could
my
give it a
concern though,
range.
with it being able to rule out the pay-as-you-go
I'm-
option
Yeah.
is that,
Sorry, go ahead.
well, is that, you know, like, when Peter said, okay, well, if we did this, this, and this, like, to actually, I think to scope out, like, what that actually has to look like would require a pretty big level of detail to be able to.
You basically you needed the renovation, you need the plan for the renovation, and then dissect the plan into, I can do this finger, that finger, or these three fingers together, and those are the pay-as-you-go options. And their associate overlap. I mean, without having the full renovation proposal, this is what you need to do. It's impossible to build the other pieces. You can't pull them out of the air.
So let's jump into the conversation about the,
Yep.
the building. a little
Yeah,
bit, 'cause I
and
think that
so
that's pretty.
to that point, what I'll be doing is these different options will layer it. You're not going to get all of them all at once, but basically I'll try to bring each option up in terms of upgrades to the cost and all that kind of stuff at the same level. And so, like the plans that you were just mentioning are going to be as simple as a big box at the end of the building called addition. I'm not going to show every room and that kind of stuff because keep in mind, at this point in time, I'm still a volunteer, not a hired architect. So if we wanted to get into
Conceptual.
the working out all the details and that kind of stuff, we might need to have a different arrangement.
Stretch that out.
Yeah.
When
All right.
do you invoice us?
So on the walkthrough, like I said, so we went through, I'm not sure if everybody's seen the list that I've got, but basically I've got a checklist. I gave it to Ron. We went through each of these. I've got 80 something items on my checklist. There's probably 50 that actually result in a cost issue on this. And it goes through, I developed it over the last 20 years based on the Department of Education requirements. And so the big categories are the site, the building envelope, life safety, building codes, structure, handicap accessibility, indoor environmental quality, building services, interiors, security, and then other. And so last year I had come up with a list that totaled, or no, actually I think I updated, when did I update this? Like a few months ago. But this is my estimates. I came up with 11.2 million. Bonnet, Page and Stone, they were with us during the walkthrough, and they've got this list, and they've also got the Turner Group report that was done in 2018, I believe. And the numbers in here, a lot of those came from the Turner Group report. So it wasn't just me, spitballing some estimates. I worked off of previous studies so that way we can do it more quickly and more efficiently. Now Bonnet, Page and Stone is going to be looking at it and coming up with new numbers. Now,
Sorry, was that 11 million just to fix the issues you identified, or was that for?
so I want to be clear about something. That is not a project. That is simply looking at each different line item and assigning a cost. So what ends up happening is, like I said, if you're replacing the mechanical,
Yeah.
let's say you get a
But that's
room.
not an addition, right? That is just to fix what is currently in place.
That's not the
even.
price to even fix. That's
No,
just assigning dollar values to certain systems, but that's not including the cost of doing the work.
Let me explain.
Okay,
So-
no labor in there, just.
Or the incidentals, right? I'm doing the mechanical, but I have to take down my ceilings.
So
I was like, just let me explain it.
So we replaced the mechanical system, so I've got a budget line item in there for that. That is based on past experience on what a new mechanical system is for a new school. Is it going to be different for a renovation? Possibly, because now you're fishing ductwork through walls and above ceilings and all that kind of stuff. So that number might be a little bit wrong when we actually get to design a new renovation or a renovation project. But it gives us a ballpark estimate to give you a sense of the value. You can't make a value decision without the value, and I think that's what Ron is getting at. He's frustrated that we don't have the numbers.
It's a wrong.
Huh?
It's a wrong. Rough order of magnitude of what everything on that list would should be.
Exactly. So now you've got a room that you're putting in ductwork in order to get the mechanical system to work, and you have to replace the ceilings, and you want to replace the lights because you're ripping those down, and it's cost effective to do that then. But what happens if those lights don't need to be replaced? You're still replacing them. So the cost in the project might actually be higher than the 11.2 million because of those type of well, what's the word I'm looking for?
Inefficiencies.
Inefficiencies, exactly. It might be lower because I've got some things in here, replacing certain systems that are required by code, but you don't have to have those systems if you have a sprinkler system. So I've got a sprinkler system there, and I've got these other systems in there. So there's actually some savings possibly in
Double
there.
dipping in certain areas.
Right.
without requirements.
Right, so you can't look at this list, just add it up and say, that's the project.
Just lighting alone, I did a project a few years ago, and almost 50% of it was paid for with a rebate from Eversource.
Yep.
You know, those are the kind of, that's where we would make up the difference, and plus the long-term operating efficiency of having lower electric bills, you know.
So what's gonna happen is, we get through this list, we come up with the new numbers, and then each option, we start to create a project. And so the pay-as-you-go, we would find a wing in the building, I would look at this list and say, all right, we wanna do this, this, that, and the other thing, and we put it together in a project that makes some sense, and then we add soft costs to it, because it's gonna take an engineer to design the mechanical system, it's gonna take, a construction manager, there's other soft costs in there that go into each of those projects. So even then, you don't have a total until you actually put it together in a project. So you've got, well, the pay-as-you-go probably has 10 projects right there. So there's a lot of work in just generating each of those and seeing how it fits and what the phasing and what the schedule is, the sequence of all those things.
One thing to note, though, just, and this is why we need to kind of keep things in context. So 11 million does not include, architectural and construction management dollars. So make that 25%, but that's still $13 million to rehab the existing structure.
You jump into conclusions when we're
No,
not there.
I'm jumping to conclusions only because we've said a minute ago that a new school could come down to 25. I don't want to have that number out there as, that's pretty attractive, when we don't have any concept. I'm just trying to say, the 11 million does include addressing all the systems, including the parking lot, right?
It's got,
Yeah.
what did we
And
say?
sprinklers, and seismic.
So
Let me just finish the thought. I agree that number is not it's not a project,
Right.
but it is relative in the sense that it warrants that we need to look at the renovation and addition with as much.
That's what we're doing.
I don't think, has anyone said otherwise?
No, but I just didn't want to.
I feel like we're still talking about the pay-as-you-go option, evaluating that in the same level of detail right now.
Can I just throw in my experience, Dan DeWitt? So when I look at that 11.2 million, that turns into 19.6. So that factors a 40% wrong factor, right? Because nothing's been designed, nothing's been projected out. So I would add a 40% factor to that to cover my bases of saying we did design it out. So there's architecture fees, there's design fees, there's all the hidden costs, and then there's a 25% soft cost that you're gonna have on top of that project. So that turns into, that 11.2 turns into 19.6.
We won't know what that number is until we actually create those
Exactly.
projects. And so we can't just add 25% and say that's what it is. So that's
Exactly, that's
so
just my experience.
And the only reason, correct me if I'm wrong, Kyle, the only reason why you are able to more confidently say when you're talking about a new building is because you've done a lot more of the legwork on that.
Yes.
Okay.
And then you have to compare it anyway, because if we're talking $2 million projects and you reduce the cost of a new building to 25 million or whatever, realistically, the cost per year, they're not gonna be comparable. The new building will be cheaper on an annual basis. So we have to make sure we compare apples to apples.
Right.
Well, and there's things other than construction that play into there. There's, when we're talking about, I mentioned replacing the lights. Well, what's the cost of sending somebody around the building replacing light bulbs? It adds up over 20 years. So
Let's
if you
get rid of the old fluorescent tubes is a
right, so if you
nightmare
have
now.
a 20-year LED fixture, you're saving in maintenance costs.
I think you just smash them in the parking lot.
So,
Anniversary among friends.
and, you know, the worksheets that I produced, try to track some of those things. Sometimes it's a spitball estimate, you just don't know. But it looks at the energy efficiency, it looks at human resources such as the maintenance, cleaning the floors, new materials, the linoleum and other products that LVT and stuff like that do not require waxing. Think about the cost for the maintenance staff to move all the chairs out of a room to wax the floors, and they do that every year.
Or the fact that we just, well, I mean, we get to the floors, but like, there's certain things that we just don't get to on a maintenance perspective with our current staff.
I was gonna say, do you even wax the floors?
We do. Have you looked? The floors actually look really good. They do a great job with the floors.
So,
We got, Kyle, we got two.
Yep.
We have a question and a half back there.
You go first.
Marilyn, wait, just quick clarification. So the 11 point whatever, not a project cost, is just to address the deficiencies in the existing building. It does nothing to address the configuration, the educational programming that can be offered there, the sort of programmatic problems that the current.
the idea
Or
of
the space. Like,
these,
we don't get any additional space with that.
the idea of these numbers is just to give you a general sense of the overall condition of the building.
So, sorry. No. Joel, sorry. We've talked a lot about cost, and I don't know if you're planning on getting it, but I'd love to hear more about like exactly what you found in your evaluation, what the issues were that you identified, because I think that speaks to a lot what you brought up of is there a need for a new school? Like, what are these things that add up to 11 million?
Yeah, so let's go category by category. If I go line item by line item, might be midnight before we
Just-
get
We will see this.
Can you compare that out to the group too, please?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Before you do that, we didn't look, the inspection was not what I had suggested. We didn't look at anything other than what you could see in the walkthrough.
What do you think was missing?
Well, when I talked about it, if you remember, when I brought up we need an inspection, like we needed to look at the floor joists in the old section to see if they're any difficulty,
What are we gonna see, though?
whether there's rot in the wooden trusses.
Well, so in that section of the building, it was difficult to get above those ceilings because of the way that the ceiling's construction. And we don't do an invasive inspection, usually. That gets into a lot more.
I mean, that was a Turner report. I think that cost us like $20,000 to $30,000.
Yeah.
So like.
Yeah.
No, but they didn't do it either, so.
Oh, they were supposedly in the ducts, because I specifically asked them to look, because at the time, there was a lot of conversation about the ducts needed cleaning throughout the building.
So Carrie made them get in them.
I said, can we put this question to rest? Can you actually open the ducts and shine a flashlight? Let's put this question to rest. It was in the scope sheets.
We
that is a no.
could see from the outside some significant damage. There's that one section out back by the gully there that's, yeah, I mean, it's pretty bad. You can go see it.
You called that low-quality construction at one point in your conversation a few weeks ago.
Yeah, well, kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but basically the whole 40s and 50s wing, is what I call it, is not high-quality construction. On the back side of the building, when you look at what you see on the outside, that block is the same block that you see on the inside. There is no other material, there's no insulation, there's nothing. And in that age building, the building codes didn't require reinforcing. And the snow loads were at a different level. The structural engineers in New Hampshire in 2000 came up with a new set of criteria for snow loading because we had, like I mentioned, Fall Mountain collapsed, Pennachuck Middle School in Nashua collapsed. There's been several school collapses in the state, and so they upped those numbers. So I know just from that experience that school does not meet current snow load requirements. It's a given.
So you would have to, essentially to meet current snow load requirements, would have to rebuild the roofs, or what does that entail? Like, what does that even
It comes
mean?
down to the project. I'd have to look, are we putting new mechanical units on the roof? If we are, we'd have to upgrade it. If we're not, I don't know. It kind of depends on the level of renovation. So one of the things that I still need to do, I think I mentioned this last time I was here, is that there are some thresholds. When you go over a certain number when you're renovating a school building, you then have to bring it up to full codes, including the seismic. And so
Which is in your 11 million.
Hmm?
Which was in your
Yeah.
11 million.
Yes, yes.
Which includes sprinklers as well.
But again, it's just a spitball to get us to a value that we can then start to compare. So anyways, so going through the list, so the site is one of the biggest issues. The car and bus separation is a nightmare there. It needs to be fixed. This is a big issue with the state. Going back way to Ed Murdo, when he was there, he really looked at that kind of stuff and
Said not $1 to renovate that school.
yeah, and so it is a problem. It is a problem, and when you look at what happens when cars are lining up, the video, the drone video that was done, those cars, it does show how dangerous that can be because the car's stacking up out.
Can I stop you there?
Sure.
The reason being is there's an easy fix for that. And I don't want to keep saying that until we actually have something, we sit down and look at, how could you solve that?
But
It's still a problem. Identifying the problem.
Well, he's inferring that it can't be fixed.
I didn't hear him say that.
No, what I'm hearing is
Do you
he's
not want to
identifying
discuss
the
the
issue.
problems? Like,
I do. I don't.
Where do you want to go with the conversation?
So first we're listing the problems, then we can discuss how to address them.
Go ahead, sorry.
So car and bus
And
separation.
then we're not even talking about solutions.
So, the parking is inadequate, that we had identified that from before, there needs to be more parking. The little things like the site lighting is inadequate and outdated. We did talk about, I think we had talked about the oil tank when we were there. I've got that on my list as needing to be replaced because of the age of it. After a certain number of years, you have to start checking it like every single year, and after a certain number of years, you're just supposed to replace it. So, that's not. And the other thing I should explain about this list, and you'll see it when we issue it, is that I don't just give a number. I also prioritize it: high, medium, low priority. So the high priority stuff is the code requirements that we have to do, that you should be doing right away. The medium is you're going to need to do it very soon, and then the low is the things that it's worth considering. It could be saving you money if you're doing added insulation, or it could be just something that improves the quality of the building that you should be doing. But it's not. I don't want you to think that it's all or nothing. That there are choices inside this. The building envelope. So in my original report, I'd said the roof condition was compliant, and I didn't have a number for that. When we went and looked at it, it is in relatively good shape. There is a couple areas where the seams have started to come apart and water is getting inside the building. Those can be fixed. There's been a lot of patches on certain parts of the building. Other parts of the building look much better. But then Dan gave me a list of when these were installed, and come to find out, all but one, the warranty has expired. And the one that hasn't expired expires next year. So we decided when we were doing the walkthrough to add, at least on the low priority column, replacing the roof. Replacing the roof is a fairly expensive endeavor. It's about $10 a square foot, and it's about a 50,000 square foot building, so you're talking about $500,000. If we add insulation at the same time, it's basically going to double that figure. So you're looking at something that's almost $1 million. So that's in addition to the 11.2 that I've already got.
But to your point of like scoping different sections of projects, right? If you're going to do the roof,
right,
you're probably doing your mechanicals too, because you're not going to put your mechanicals on a bad roof to then pull them off and put a new roof on.
We would take one wing of the building and do all of that, and then do that a section at a time. Life safety actually scored pretty well. There's not a lot of life safety issues, and when I'm saying life safety, I haven't talked about sprinklers yet, or is that in this part of it? This is more of the life safety code, not the building code. Sprinklers are building code. And so we've got a couple of rooms that are over 1,000 square feet that we should add a door in. We're talking $15,000, not millions. Some quarter ratings that need to be fixed. The big one is fire alarm and emergency lighting. That needs to be replaced, and that's about $250,000. Moving on to building code, the big item there is the sprinkler system. And that's My estimate was about $900,000, and I'm waiting to hear back from Bonapage Stone if they think that's adequate or too much. They actually, generally, Ron, if you remember the conversation, Keith had said, Kyle, you're usually too low. I'm a little too ambitious about, trying to get the cost down. But on some of these, he actually identified he thought they were a little too high. So my thought is that when we do get the numbers in, some are going to be higher, some are going to be lower. They're just going to be more accurate, but I don't think that the bottom line is going to change.
I think the 2018 report had 900,000, so if you think
I'm
that-
probably low.
Probably.
Yeah, I'm probably low. And that was before the pandemic, so
Yes,
that
so-
means another 40% on top of that. Snow load capacity under structural, we do, there should be some improvements. I've got 116,000 in there for updating. What I'm thinking is that it's maybe not the entire building, but if you put a new mechanical unit on the roof and you have to update the joist around that unit, it's gonna cost some money. So we've got some money in there for that. Wall condition, that's where it gets a little bit trickier. I've got basically $250,000 in for updating the wall structural system. As I said, those walls were not built with reinforcing. So if there was, say, really strong winds or an earthquake, and people think that we're not in the earthquake zone, but we are. We experience small ones over a period of time, but every few hundred years we get a big one. So we're actually preparing for the next big one. There was I think if I get my history correct, there was a magnitude 8 near Montreal in 1680 or something like that. Flattened every building in the area, but they were mostly wooden cottages. So there was no sizable damage from that, but it just shows you that we're kind of overdue for the next big one. So it is kind of important that we
Thanks,
update.
Now that nugget's going to be in my head every once in a while.
So I just want to, when
Perfectly happy
people
5
think
seconds ago.
seismic, oh, we don't need to do that here. Yeah, we actually
Is
do.
it required?
Yes.
It is.
But it's
Is it required at a certain level of cost?
So that's what I was just about to say, is that an existing building, there are certain codes that you're grandfathered in, and the building code and the seismic requirement is one of them. But when you exceed a certain level of renovations, and I need to research that to find out exactly what that number is.
Not that I'm fighting putting a sprinkler system in the building. I think we should have a fire suppression system in the building.
I'm really surprised that you don't have one. Like, there's not that many schools that don't at this point.
Question on that, like, when it triggers certain things, is it renovation costs, like, at a project level? Or an entire scope? Like, so if you did the pay-as-you-go, right? Do they only look at that in the one project that you're doing this year, and not the other 3 that you have planned for the subsequent years?
Oh, for the rent trigger, I believe it's over a course of 5 years.
Yeah.
I want to say it's 40% of a total replacement value.
They do look at other projects you have planned in the future.
Well, it's once you've spent the money. If you plan it, then, well, you haven't spent it yet. But once you get ready to spend that money, like, oh, shoot.
So then you would have to go back.
You'd have to pay attention to what you've done in previous
So it would not be smart to hit the trigger and without planning to hit the trigger, yes.
Well, I guess let me throw something out there, and that is that the codes were written for a particular reason, and that is to protect safety.
Because if you spread it out over 5 years, well,
So
we're still under. You can't know.
Would you really want to try to get around the system, or would you want to just do it right the first time? So that's a first time.
I don't think there's anybody in the room that would want to do it wrong.
No, that's what I'm thinking. So it makes sense to carry the cost for the seismic loading. I'm not even sure how we would do it. In other projects, what I've seen is that they put up cross bracing on the walls in order to give it that lateral stability.
And buttresses, yeah.
Yeah. So there's some ways to do it, and I don't know exactly how we would do it here, but something really probably should be done. Moving on to accessibility, that there are very few handicap accessible facilities in the building. The ones right off the main entrance are not handicap accessible. I believe there's a set somewhere in the building, but most of the toilet facilities are not handicap accessible. So it's not a huge number, but I've thrown $200,000 in there to renovate the toilet rooms so that they meet handicap code.
Can you do that without more space?
Oh, that's what the project's going to figure out. Okay. I think I skipped over the life safety code. No, I did talk about that. That's right. I was actually.
Did you talk about sprinklers?
I did.
It's in
The building code.
Yeah. What I did kind of discover is that code-wise, egress, life safety code, you're actually fairly compliant. There was one hiccup in the corner of the building where there's too far a distance to get to an exit, and then they put in that corridor to the outside, and that fixed it. So I didn't really find a lot of code violations. So this is all more just building systems and overall condition of those systems. Indoor environmental quality. I think we know at this point in time the mechanical systems are pretty much toast, that all of them need to be replaced. I would recommend rooftop units.
The AC in my office works really well.
Yeah.
I can't regulate it, but it works really well.
I would recommend rooftop units with ducted system, with dehumidification, which is essentially a light version of air conditioning. It will help you in your shoulder months with kids in class, and also any kind of real or perceived moisture problems in the building. Lighting is...
Those mechanicals replacing it in kind with like the oil system that's already there, or are you thinking going heat pumps and other things?
I'm not a big fan of the heat pumps. They're expensive, and I do like, we had talked about before the bond vote, more of a hybrid system where, and I'm not a fan of oil either. So I would recommend going to propane, and then maybe a combination of some heat pumps, but most of the heat comes from the propane.
Propane secondaries.
Yeah, yeah. So that way you have a dual fuel system that, if one goes down, you're still up and running. And you get the benefits of the dehumidification with the heat pumps. But, you get that backup with the oil, or not the oil, propane. But also the heat pumps, they do struggle a bit when it's really super cold. And so having the propane is I just think it's just a common sense approach that they should do.
So Jen, how are the heat pumps this year? On those cold days?
No comment.
Okay. Well said.
Yeah.
That was a big discussion at deliberative when we talked about the solar.
I will say I can't speak fully to that point due to the fact that we had systems that were completely down due to warranty issues this winter. So it was not a very clear picture. Nobody was freezing, but it was not as warm as it could have been.
And we had a very warm winter.
Yeah, it was a very mild winter.
Yeah. So bottom line, I would not rely on the heat pumps for the heating for the
I'm
building.
with you there.
Kyle,
Yep.
you mentioned propane.
Yeah.
If natural gas was available,
Then you should go with that.
that would not be a big conversion?
If you had propane,
Usually
natural
jet.
gas-
Oh, if you started with propane and then,
Propane installed, all of a sudden you have the ability to get natural gas. Would that be a simple conversion?
I think so. I think it's the jet sizes because
It's the only difference, yeah.
It's the nozzle and it's the pressure regulator.
I was gonna say, yeah, and the pressure.
different amount of therms per gallon
Yep.
for each of those types.
Yep, so like most of your residential systems in commercial will have basically two settings on the pressure regulator, that it's just a spring compression and diaphragm, and then it's the jet nozzles and the combustion tubes.
And natural gas is a significant savings over propane, correct?
And propane's a significant savings over oil, from what I understand.
So, there is a possibility that by the time, we would be doing this, we'll have natural gas.
That'd be cool. That'd be good.
There'd be a gas line going right by the school, actually.
There is.
There's going to be.
Really?
What's the schedule for that?
Maintenance wise,
Within the next
it's
year,
the best you
yeah.
can get for a lack of maintenance. You don't, there's hardly anything to do with it.
There's a cost to getting the pipe up the driveway. I mean, but, yeah,
Liberty Utilities.
yeah, cool.
I'll convert right away.
M3A, American Microsoft.
Oh, so the other,
I was thinking, can we bring it down Albuquerque?
I'm with you on that one, right?
so going along with
Change that
the,
out tomorrow.
with the ventilation system is the control system. And the controls are actually fairly expensive. It's about I've got it plugged in here, about $500,000. We'll see what Bonnet Page and Son comes back with. But what we're talking about is the electronic controls that turn on and off the heat and regulate the ventilation. The current controls do not do a very good job. I believe Mike Jetty had said that the controls are Dave going around and turning them on.
That's because somebody decided it'd be a savings to kill off the service contract.
Oh.
And when you do that, you usually lose access to the proprietary control system.
Right. Well, even what's there needs to be replaced.
But you're talking about adding dampers and stuff, and so each room will have its own climate.
Well, oh yeah, exactly. Each room will have its
Just
own.
get an alert on the guy's phone even.
And
like,
it'll be a computer-controlled system, so that way you can step it down at night. So when the kids are not in the room, you can turn the heat from 72 down to 68 or 64 or something like that.
Quick return on investment.
Oh yeah.
well,
Yes,
improved,
absolutely.
and you'll have improved efficiency of manpower even, because you can
Well, it's
actually
like
redirect.
every residential Wi-Fi available thermostat that's there in Home Depot. And I schedule that with a $200 Wi-Fi thermostat right now.
Right. So the guy who's currently adjusting them can now do other maintenance activities.
Right.
Like mow the lawn.
That's your job.
All right, moving on. So building services. So, I've broken this down into, different categories. So there might be some overlap. So when we're talking about like the propane, building services is actually where I talk about the boilers. The boilers are in rough shape. They need to be replaced. Let's see, what else was there? The plumbing, we already talked about handicap accessibility, but basically all the plumbing is a little archaic. There's a lack of water fountains or bottle fillers, and so there's a few things there that are code that we need to add to bring it up to code. Power distribution is a bit of an issue. That the main entrance was replaced 4 years ago, Dan?
Before it was 5. I'm finishing my 4th year, and it was prior to that, so 5 to 6 years ago.
And apparently what they said at the time was that the system was old enough that a lot of the parts are hard to get, and so it was a bit of a yank to get that in. And when we looked at the rest of the panels, they're all at that archaic level, so we're a little, it was a little unsure.
Oh, sorry, are you talking about the electrical switch?
Yeah, the big one.
It was the summer of 2020.
2020.
When everything that could have happened.
Yeah.
And that was.
Month 2 of my time.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but that was in the neighborhood of $50,000.
It was.
Yes.
Yep. 75, I think was it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was 50 to 75, and it was by sheer luck that the right part was at the right warehouse, I believe, up in like Laconia, where they could put it together. But it was basically, we either have the part in Laconia, or you're going to have to come up with a contingency plan for the building we out of commission till possibly Columbus Day or Thanksgiving.
So we know we didn't open every cabinet to look at them, but we know that all these other panels were the same vintage as the one that failed. There's a possibility that one could fail in the future. In addition to that, the sub panels, when you go out into the wings, a lot of those are full.
And might I say too that what caused that was not some catastrophic failure. What caused that was a wind came through and knocked a branch by the food pantry, and it knocked power. And then when the power came back on,
Power surge.
a surge blew it.
So the power distribution through the building is pretty much at its limit, and so as outlets have been added to classrooms, because back in the day when those were built, we only put an outlet on every wall, and now you need one like every 12 feet. And when you look at the number of computers and Chromebooks and that kind of stuff,
Smart screens, all that.
Oh yeah, the TVs on the walls and all that kind of stuff. There's a huge draw in power in these buildings that wasn't there when the building was built. And it's very difficult to add to the panels that are already at maximum capacity, and then you're running conduit along the wall and dropping in the classrooms. It becomes unsightly, difficult, and expensive to.
You get back a lot of electricity once you change those LEDs back.
That's true. That's true. That's true.
Yeah, but it still doesn't give you more breakers in the panel.
Right.
No,
Right.
no, but it does limit the load.
I mean, the electrical's maxed out, obsolete, and it's scattered.
Right.
Particularly when you get all the humidifiers running.
Interiors. The ceilings pretty much throughout the building they need to be replaced. I mean, they're sagging, they're dirty, they're in rough shape.
When you say ceilings, you mean the
Tiles,
It's
the
not
tiles.
like the physical joists that make up the ceiling, but the drop ceiling.
just
is the tile.
just the tiles. Just replace the tiles, and it's relatively easy to do. I mean, you could be doing it now, but if you did the whole building at once, it ends up being fairly expensive. Like you're $250,000 just to do the tiles. It's same thing with the floors. The floors again, the flooring that you've got is vinyl composition tile, which is what we were putting in schools for decades, but because of the environmental issues and some other issues and just cost effectiveness, most schools are going to linoleum tile, which does not have to get waxed and stripped every year. So it's less in maintenance and it's more durable, lasts longer, and it's becoming more available. So to replace it with vinyl tile, it's probably the same cost as replacing it with the newer tile, but you'll make the money back within a couple of years probably.
From a renovation perspective, do you have to pull all the flooring out to do those, or do you go over the top of what's there?
You pull them out. But it's, a little scraper and you get them off really fast.
Yeah. I feel like I've tried to do that before and didn't.
Well, I was gonna just ask, like, is there any concern of any of the portions of the school having asbestos tiles?
Yep.
The gym, right?
Yep.
The gym.
The gym.
So, but
And also, I believe the main office area. So that general section, not just the gym, but because I only know this because going back to the summer of 2020, they installed I don't know if you remember, they installed the new window and they put the two cabinets, and they took out there used to be an old radiator cap there, and there was concern that they may have to leave parts of it like underneath the counter. They may not be able to do a full removal because they're afraid that they were going to disrupt asbestos there. So I do know that it exists in the hallway outside of the office, the general gym area. I don't know how deep it goes there, but I believe it may run down the hallway that gets to the nurse's office too. So,
was there any component for asbestos removal in the
50,000.
Okay.
They had done sections of it every year.
Well, the problem with those inspections, the O'Hara reports, they only check to see what was investigated before.
They actually had projects where they would remove the tile. They actually did
okay.
abatement regularly. Like every summer, there was a section that was abated.
Right.
So a lot of it's been removed.
Yeah, I agree with you there. A lot of it's been removed, but there is some remaining, and I feel
Yeah, sometimes you make more of a mess when you remove it than if you just.
Do they still encapsulate it?
Yes, but now you're living with it for forever, and the problem with encapsulating is you got to keep on doing those reports, and if you do any work, so say floors so say you want to bolt something to the floor, well, you have to do it in a special way so you're not disturbing the asbestos, because now you're screwing through it. So a school is better off getting rid of it, but we have encapsulated plenty of times before.
But you're doing that today with even drilling a hole in concrete, you have to drill it and capture all the dust and even it's in construction, it's a nightmare, but.
Yeah, well, in renovations, sorry to keep harping on the renovations, but it does end up being more expensive because you're doing that, whereas new construction is a little bit cleaner, a little bit easier. I did skip over something, and that was the windows. And what made me think about it is that there's oftentimes asbestos around the caulking in the windows, especially in the 40s and 50s wing. I would suspect that there might be something hot in there. And what did I put for? Yeah, exactly. I had $300,000 for replacing windows, and I don't think that replaces everything, but it replaced, at least the oldest section of the building. What we found is that even some of the newer sections of the building, like the mid-'80s, the 3 classrooms that are next to the gym, some of those windows, even though they're not as old as some of the older ones, actually perform pretty poorly. The teachers were complaining that standing in there, they could feel a breeze whenever the wind was
because they
blowing.
put in just one massive window.
Yeah. And it could be something else going on too, but so I have a budget for
Each of those
replacing windows,
has
but not everything.
Massive, 15 by 8 window.
Well, there was a period of time when they do like a section, and then they do another section. This is the pay-as-you-go method, right? They were doing sections of windows at a time.
Just to, it came
And
up
never
a
got
couple
finished,
meetings ago. Someone asked, and I followed up with Dave Ross, that at one point there was a staged plan for replacing windows. Dave Ross had no recollection of that, but he was going to look into it.
We don't remember it.
But it stopped.
Yeah.
It did stop, but it was a annual expenditure.
Yeah, he was gonna look into when it was.
Hey, look at the old budgets, it's gotta be there.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is I believe it may predate Dave Ross taking over as
Could
a
be.
level of management.
So I couldn't even tell you how far.
He couldn't recall at what year, because he didn't recall that even being a project.
I just don't even remember how far into the project they were, because
Yeah.
it sounded like they were almost done when we were talking about it, so.
I thought they'd almost just started.
Oh, see, I thought
I
they
can
were
show you
almost
the because some. I mean, how long have you been in town?
I do want
16
to.
years.
We just got to keep this moving, just because we're almost at our time frame here. And
Yeah, so the last item I have on the list is security, and we talked a little bit about that at the beginning. Basically, Homeland Security has a recommendation list on how a school gets designed, and one of the big things is the main vestibule. Yeah, right now you come into a locked vestibule, which is good, but to get to the staff, you've got to go through a hallway, and I've been there when kids are walking through, and that's not okay for Homeland Security. So the solution to that is not so easy, because there's classrooms on that side and there's classrooms on this side, and you're coming in the middle. And that's why I said at the beginning that one of the concepts that I had was, let's move the whole main office out of there and in a place where it's on the outside face of the building where you have a good secure vestibule. So that ends up being a little bit more expensive, but again, that comes down to what's the project, and we'd have to look at that.
You had a number for that, did you, in there?
I threw in $1 million.
Yeah, okay.
And so that together comes up with that's what you've assigned,
Yeah,
11 million, which is not a project cost, but it is a.
It gives you a sense of the needs in the building.
Like you said, an order of magnitude. You know it's not 100 million.
Yeah.
But you know it's
You knew you'd have to do something. I think
10 to 25.
in my original study, going back 2 years now, one of the comments that I'd made was that there is no smoking gun here. There's no fatal flaw that says you can't renovate the building. There's just
Death by
1,000 cuts. And so that's kind of where we're at. And so, yeah, and that's it. And again, going back 2 years, when I was first hired, I was sitting here and I told the committee that we needed to look at additions and renovations, and we needed to compare it to all sorts of different options. I've actually managed to get that requirement built into the new law. That, I recommend that to Amy Clark, and she wrote it right in, that no school can move forward without researching all the different options.
Great.
So,
good analysis.
So where we stand right now, in some ways, is not much better off than we were before, in the sense of like next steps, right? So we need to figure out next steps, and we at some point have to get to a place where we are figuring out going in deeper on one or more options. Where I'm still a little bit hairy here is like, the new construction's easy to wrap my head around because I was involved with the new construction plan, and you've now said, okay, like the number could be as low as this, right? So that gives me like a number there. What I don't know is when we just talked about 11 million, and I don't know if that assertion was correct, that like, well, it's actually 19 if how close are we getting on these?
yes. So basically, I've vetted all these different options last year or even the year before. How many did we come up with? 8, 9 different options?
9. In fact, actually, just because you're not checking your email, I was able to find a link to the YouTube video of that meeting where he's discussed, and the best I could find just now for now with the document it's just a simple pros cons. I think most people are familiar with the pros cons list that we did for options 1 through 5. This is just the pros and cons. It's a one-sheeter for each options 6 through 9.
Yeah. So I think another thing that people have complained about, and I understand it, but at the same time, it's hard to control, is that every time I update these numbers, now we've got these multiple versions in the past, and everybody's like, well, why'd the numbers change? Well, it changed because I looked at it again. So I'm trying to do it one more time and be as accurate as possible, and that's why I'm not doing it too fast, because I want to take the time to make sure it's done right. So what I plan on doing is basically dusting off those old worksheets, and all 9 options I think are still on the table. I will look at updating some of those numbers.
Can I?
Yeah.
I don't think all 9. Not that you went overboard, but you over-investigated options 6 through 9, and you were starting to talk about little K-2 schools here and later 2 schools there. Like, I don't know if we need to really lay into all
Okay.
options 7 through 9.
Well,
Just
okay.
to maximize your.
So as a reminder, what is 7,
Your
what is
gratis
8, and what
time.
is 9?
So it was, one was keeping the GMS property, but basically kind of getting rid of the 50s and making it like a pre-K to 2 school. And then
Okay.
and then you'd have a 3 through 6 and a 7 through, it was all variations of different
Okay.
things.
Just taking your
Building
idea.
a new school, actually on the
LMS
Riley land,
A small little
a
school,
smaller
like a
pre-K to
schoolhouse
2
kind of
school on the
place.
Riley land with a 3, building a pre-K on
Yep.
the
LMS
the
site?
LMS like could be ball fields, and then a 3 and then a general 2 school consolidation was in there too.
Right, so we looked at moving the 7th and 8th grade to the high school and, K through 4 to the LMS site, realizing that got the LMS a little too big and wasn't fitting well, it was hard to get the additions. I came up with the concept of, well, why don't we just put a K through 2 right next to it and make LMS 3 through 6. So it's the same number of grades, therefore we wouldn't need an addition to LMS. It was attractive for a little bit, but that site's not a good site for doing any kind of new construction because of the proximity of the wetlands, proximity to steep slopes, access through the what's the name of the-
McElwain.
that one. And then so then thought about moving it to the Riley property.
Well,
Thought-
that one's out, right?
thought about putting it at GMS, because if you're taking out 2 grades, suddenly
Maximize that good core.
the existing starts to work, and the smaller gym works better for the smaller kids. So it was worth exploring. It wasn't chosen by the committee at the time, but I think it's worth dusting it off and showing it to you.
I would agree.
We've also got, so one other thing that I want to get clarification on is that the renovation project, I think there's different levels that people are thinking. That we've got a few different flavors of the renovation. You've got the renovation that brings the school up to the same quality as a new school. It's very difficult, but that's what I've been focused on with all these different options. Because, if you don't do that, then the comparison to a new school is just not the same. It's apples and oranges. But is there a version that could be less? I've talked to Ron about the gymnasium. Well, why do we need to build a new gymnasium? We have one. Well, it's too small. Well, if, you could just get by with a smaller gym. That's okay. So what's that version that's the minimal at GMS that you can do? Just keep in mind, it's not apples to apples comparison to other options. But if you're willing to put up with concessions in the educational quality, it's possible. I mean, if you think about it, what is a renovation? If you replace the ceiling tiles, buy Dave a couple of boxes of ceiling tiles and you've renovated the space, right? Well, not to the same level that you would for these other options, but where do you draw that line? With the renovations, it's very difficult. You might end up painting the wall on one side of the quarter and not painting it on the other side because you don't have to. But everybody looks at it and says, why didn't you just do that? And I have to explain that there's a demising line between the scope. Otherwise, the scope just creeps on and on. So if we get into that discussion about the minimum renovation project, we got to be really careful about identifying the exact scope, because it's going to look attractive in terms of the cost. But then when you get it, you're going to be like, why do we do that? Why didn't we just do a little bit more?
Well, can I, on that note, I think there's gonna be, as I perceive, trying to put my voter hat on,
Yeah.
there is the notion, you don't need to do anything. There is some people that think
Yeah.
that. And then there's,
Anything at all?
yeah, no, you don't need, and the reason, and I can, from working in a company that was famous for deferred maintenance, they said, okay, when I went and told them I need to do this, well, you got by last year, so you can get by this year. So there is that fraction. So then there's, the next group is, what is the minimum you need to fix the existing and keep the portables the way they are for another 10 years? There's that option. Then there is renovate the entire school to some level of improvements, kind of like the 11 million. And I would say then there's another option that says, okay, is there elements of the existing that could remain and become a core? And I'd advocate, based on being in there a number of times and the talks, is the 50s and 60s building goes away.
Yep.
The remaining core with additional classrooms gets improved, and the existing gets brought up to a high standard. The new is new.
Yep.
And we may not have a new gym, but everything else is essentially a new building.
Right.
That's the renovations and additions option.
Yep.
Correct.
Yep.
So,
But a limited scope renovation.
Limited scope. It almost gets to the point where you need to tell me how far you want to go. And then I can put the project together that would come up with a cost. So if you said, the voters would pass something that's 15 million, I could show you what you could get accomplished for that. It's not going to accomplish everything that other.
at this point, we don't know what the voters, and here's what I'm hearing from
Research
people.
that.
Some kind of direction though, like on.
Yeah.
Well, but I think personally, I just outline what I think we need to look at.
Yeah, we gotta, I think we need, he's looking for a little more specific than that.
Well, what did I lay out? Maybe,
Well, I mean, you don't have to
variations?
replace the ceiling tiles. You don't have to replace the ceiling tiles.
no, that's what I'm saying.
Should.
The minimum, one of the things is a minimum. Deal with the moisture. What would that take? To get rid of that moisture issue? Because that's been.
It would significantly help to replace the flooring.
Okay.
Yeah, and so, interesting enough, that was one of the things that I had said earlier that the moisture on the floor was not a problem. There's tests that showed that the moisture level in the school is not exceeding a typical or what's compared to other schools. But when I was there last week or 2 weeks ago, it was interesting. I noticed evidence of moisture problems on the floor. What's happening is that the slab has a high moisture content, and it causes the cement in the slab to become alkaline, and that's caustic, and it's causing the glue to become viscous. And then when people walk on it, the glue actually squirts out the corners, and you see these little black lines outlining all the tiles. I hadn't seen that before, and it could have been that I'd been there right after Dave cleaned the floors, and it was gone. But I noticed that the other day. So I'm kind of eating back a little bit of what I had said before about there not being moisture problems.
That was in the old section, right?
So,
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that's where I noticed
Where
it.
the asbestos tiles are?
No.
No.
so should we install more asbestos? Is it? Can we find that? I bet we could find it in a landfill.
This stuff lasts like iron, it does.
So
yeah.
we're 10 minutes beyond. I think it's important that we get some direction. And we may not get all of the direction, but we're not scheduled to meet again for another month. Because the school board has to meet for the next meeting.
It gives me a little time to dust off this stuff and update it, work with Bonnet Payne Stone. I've got some other presentation materials. I think we've talked about that.
And the
that I
agreement
have,
was
so.
the subcommittees who tried to get together during that time to work on some of the projects that we agreed to last month, correct, or last meeting?
I'd like you to think about these different options and reconstitute that pros and cons list in your views, not just mine. And so that way, maybe it kind of helps to winnow down some of these options, as Dan was just saying, and so that we can focus on the ones that are really making a lot of sense. Because keep in mind, my time is a little short due to the contractual relationships that we have or don't have.
I mean, my thing is, like, we can come up with those options, but I think we need to get the survey out to the community to understand what the community wants for options, not just us.
Right, I think it's part of that survey that we have to put a number on some of those things, so people
Yeah,
have
right.
an idea of like what they're comparing. So we have to decide, are we gonna put all 9 with a number? Or are we gonna put 4 with a number?
Right, yeah.
I almost wonder if there's a pre-step to that survey, because if you send a survey out to the committee or the community that says, do you want to ship your kids to Alvern? Yes, no, maybe so. And people are 100% against that idea or 100% for that idea, that moves.
The word ship our kids anywhere is not part of this conversation.
Just use that as an
But
example.
I'm just saying,
I know
you
that's
know,
been one of the rumors on the street. That's why.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. We don't want that anywhere on any survey.
Oh, I know.
Hold on.
It was my kids.
They're telling the incoming 8th graders they may not graduate.
Trust me, I had to calm my 8th graders when my kids came back from push-up day. There were some 12th graders, which was clarified with our students when they came back. But they were told they're not graduating from Campbell.
Right.
By kids to kids.
So,
That's one of the 9 options, right?
Okay, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So I think where I'd like to leave this at the moment is we definitely need to push forward with the discussion about gathering community information. I think that that's a critical component. It sounds like Kyle does have some more for us. We do need to provide a little bit more detail on the. We've received some information about the deficiencies. I think we need to provide a little more detail on what a renovation would look like, or what a pay-as-you-go type of what we think.
Find the scopes.
Right. And I think that's.
I'll take if you don't mind, I'll put together a list of what I think we've talked about here in general and send it out and say, okay, is this the options for looking at GMS? And everybody agrees, then we can give that to Kyle.
Perfect.
Okay.
All right.
I think you got it.
And I have the-
Because this is the minimum is not mine, this is the minimum, right? Everyone's
Well,
got a
that's
different
it.
opinion.
Right.
Like what you described as a minimum and, you know, with the last of the.
I'll try to put in
criteria.
some description so that we,
Well, I thought, well, you know, to me, the minimum has to include ditching the cafeteria and putting it someplace else, because it's too darn close to the street. And so keeping that core, in my mind, needs to have the cafeteria moved someplace else.
The size of the gymnasium.
We have
Well,
to think about
I think that what we
I'm
can.
not-
The cafeteria, and build a new gym.
I think that what we can get to is we can get to a list that we can then discuss as a group. Because it sounds like with the high school, that's how you guys got to the final iteration, was you.
So, can I just clarify, are we looking at meeting as committees? Because I want to reiterate who the committees are, just to make sure before we go. So I have communication would be Joe L., me, Denise, Rich, and Jason. Is that correct? I have information, IT collecting data, Dan, Brad, Ron, and Joe Jositis. And then I don't know where you guys want to be in those. You probably want to view each of those 2 committees.
Sure.
Do you want to pick?
Peter, you want to help us with the Google Drive?
I hate the Google Drive.
Matt, you're going to help us
I might
with
learn
the
how to use
communication?
it.
Okay.
can I go back to the survey? How do we perceive and when do we perceive that the survey would be ready?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. My biggest concern with information gathering is that's not an easy task to actually design a good survey. Like typically people hire people to do this. So quite honestly, like I think we need to look at what do we want to, what do we think we want to learn? But I don't know that we should, I think at some point we should evaluate whether or not we have to bring someone in to actually create and administer it.
Can you take us to the next meeting so we at least meet once?
Yeah, that was
Yeah,
the
that's
plan, right?
that's the plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that it was called communication for the purpose of what information or data do we need to get out in order to gather that information, because there's so much,
What information we want back, too.
right,
When
Kyle,
is
you-
our next meeting?
July.
Can we talk later?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I need to run.
Our
if you
next
guys
meeting, I'm
talk to my
sorry.
committee.
Thank you,
So-
Kyle.
I believe it's
Thank you,
July
folks.
10th.
Thank you, Kyle.
Our next meeting as of right now is July 10th, because our the regularly scheduled meeting has been replaced with a school board meeting.
Regularly scheduled meeting, well, that-
Yes.
And I believe at the last meeting we talked about getting if we're going to
We
do the
have,
survey.
we have one
then we
last
do it in
statement, and then
September.
we're going to adjourn because we're 15 minutes over.
We've been spending 2.5 hours talking about the cost of doing something. I think we need to resurrect, because I know there was information out there about the cost of doing nothing,
Yeah.
right? The deferred maintenance, the things that are gonna break in the middle of winter, the kids getting sick because of moisture, blah, 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 blah. There's a cost of doing nothing to help educate the community as to why something needs to be done, right? You have to add that to the list as option 10.
Good. Thank you. All right, we are going to adjourn, and we will meet again on July 10th. Thank you.
Hopefully with governing documents.
That was my fault. I will fully.
Because you were at the walkthrough, did they assess the portables at all? Because if we're not gonna do any addition,